United States Senate has changed to Republican control. Just an hour ago, it was announced that former Vice President Walter Mondale has lost to Norm Coleman in Minnesota. The House remains in the hands of Republicans, but in governor's races, Democrats have picked up some seats. Good morning. It is Wednesday, November 6th, and welcome to the Washington Journal. We're going to go through some of the election results this morning. Then we'll visit the hotline, and later Tim Curran will join us from Roll Call, and we'll also have some political reporters from Congressional Quarterly focusing on the future makeup of the House and the Senate. And after all the punditry, it's time to start hearing from you across the country. Give us your reactions to the results and what it means for issues important to you and what it means for the future of your political party. For Democrats, you can start dialing in at 202-585-3881. For Republicans, 202-585-3880. And for all others, 202-585-3882. Well, we'll start this morning by taking a look at what some of the numbers are. The current Senate rundown for right now shows for the 108th Congress, 51 Republicans, 46 Democrats, and 1 independent. There are still two races out there yet to be determined. In the makeup of the House of Representatives, you'll see that the numbers are 226 Republicans, 203 Democrats, and 1 independent. There are still 5 seats out there yet to be determined. And as we mentioned a little bit earlier, the race has been called in Minnesota. The former Vice President of the United States, Walter Mondale, has lost in that race, somewhat of a surprise to many, and Norm Coleman has won. We have with us on the line this morning a reporter from the St. Paul Pioneer Press. Holly Heiser is joining us. Good morning, Ms. Heiser.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine. When was this race called?
About 45 minutes ago.
And what were the final numbers?
It looks like 50 to 47%.
What?
Still a few more votes dribbling in here.
Mm-hmm. And what are you looking at in terms of trying to decide what the key factors were here?
A lot of people are really curious to find out whether the memorial last week for the late Senator Paul Wellstone had an impact on the vote. It was widely believed that this was the Democrats' race to win after Wellstone died. People expected the sympathy vote would help him out quite a bit. Then last Tuesday, we had a memorial that many people heard about turned into sort of a political rally, and there was a lot of anger statewide about that. The only question is, did it actually motivate people who might have voted for Mondale to switch and vote for Coleman instead?
And what about your governor's race, sir?
Republican won it. It's all his.
What does that mean for the future of Minnesota politics?
Well, it'll be a change for us. We've had Governor Jesse Ventura for about the past 4 years, and he's been a very interesting governor to deal with. Republican Tim Pawlenty is a little bit friendlier with the press. Governor Ventura doesn't like the press very much. But we also have serious policy issues to contend with. We have a huge budget deficit coming up, and the Republican governor has pledged not to raise taxes. We're facing potentially a $3 billion deficit, so that's a serious issue. Gun rights, we could have expanded rights to carry concealed weapons. There will be obviously some more attempts to scale back abortion rights in Minnesota, and with a Republican-controlled House and a Republican governor and a barely Democratic Senate, they'll have a little bit easier time with some of their issues.
When can we expect the former Vice President and also Mr. Coleman to come out and make their statements?
I'd sure like to know. I think they all went to bed a couple hours ago, and we haven't heard from them yet. Last we heard, the Democrats were coming out at 9 a.m. and the Republicans at noon. I suspect they won't wait that long, though.
Okay, thank you very much, Holly Heiser from the Pioneer Press in Minnesota. Appreciate it. And again, the Senate tally this morning, 51 Republicans to 46 Democrats, 1 independent, and 2 races yet to be determined. Those 2 races yet to be determined include the Louisiana Senate race, which will be going on into a runoff on December 7th, the race, the seat of Mary Landrieu. And also the other race that we're still waiting on is the South Dakota race, which has not yet been named. The Senate in Georgia has been determined. And as you can see there, Congressman Saxby Chambliss has won over the seated Senator Max Cleland, a Democrat. And that is another seat that we were looking at. Well, we're going to take some calls from you this morning, get a chance to see what you think about all of this. First call is New Jersey. Go ahead.
Hello?
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I am so happy. I am so happy that the Republicans won. and I'm so happy that the Democrats got what they deserved. This country needs to be united. We need to be all together and fight to defend this country against all our enemies. And what the Democrats did by not voting for Homeland Security was just an outrageous, statement by them, that they were more concerned about their, special interest groups and not any concern for us Americans. We were bombed. World Trade Center came down. Why are they more concerned over their votes, their union workers being protected for Homeland Security? So I'm just thrilled. I want to congratulate President Bush. He did an outstanding job.
What about your Senate race there?
I'm very upset about that. Very upset that Lautenberg won.
He's
not going to stay in. He's going to drop out. The Democrats just wanted to put somebody in there who had name recognition. And, he's going to leave.
Thanks for your call. We're going to go to Texas next. Good morning, Texas. DeSoto, Texas, a Democrat. Good morning.
Good morning. I was very disappointed in the Democrats, but the lady was talking about the country coming together. We can never come together if we go Democrat and Republicans. The economy is a big issue. Another big issue for me is the war. My niece just joined, and she's 18 years old, can't find a job in this country, and I'm in the United States, so she's going to fight for the country. But I hope when she comes back, if she comes back, that people will see that it's not an issue of Democrat and Republican, but we need to put our young people back to work. And I was for Ron Kirk for senator. I think he did a great job in Dallas, Texas. He's a visionary, and I don't see that out of Mr. Cornyn.
Thank you. What do you think about Mr. Cornyn's future in terms of what he'll do in Washington?
He'll do exactly what the president wanted him to do, because that's why he was elected. And the president made so many calls. I know I got 3 from him, recordings. And so I just want us to come together as a nation, but understand that a lot of young people, when we talk about Homeland Security, will lose their lives, and the economy is a disaster, and we need to put the jobs back, people back to work. American Airlines right now in Dallas is really in a pickle on the airline industry. We have got to support our own country.
Okay, thanks very much for the call. We're going to go next to Carlsbad, California, Republican. Good morning, Carlsbad.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Fine, thanks. Your governor is back in?
Excuse me?
Your governor has been reelected?
No. I'm a Republican. He's not my governor.
He is not your governor?
Not Davis.
What do you think of his winning election?
I'm very, very disappointed, but I'm more impressed with Orrin Hatch and the way he has shown me basically how to deal with frustration. He's just a wonderful guy. It's got to be the roughest thing he had to ever go through. Basically, this race reminds me of like the circus coming to town. The elephants are going by and leaving piles of Democrat excrement behind them. I just love that union people will probably have to come and pick it all up. And there will be legal action in Minnesota, because Democrats have no class, and they're all ugly people.
Thanks for the call this morning. I am looking right now for my sheet of paper, which has on it the list of the Senate chairman, and I don't find it. I'm going to ask our producer to see if they can bring me another one, because what we want to do this morning is walk through the Senate leadership, specifically the Senate committee chairman. Here it is. I have it right here. What we want to do is walk through the committee chairmanships in the Senate and give you an idea of how that's going to change with the Republicans taking back control of the United States Senate. Of course, Trent Lott would be, or could be, the new majority leader of the United States Senate, but there could be some changes and will be some changes in terms of the chairmanships of some of the major committees. For instance, in the Appropriations Committee, Senator Byrd of West Virginia will no longer be the chairman. The chairman could be Ted Stevens of Alaska, who is the ranking minority member there now. Budget would go back to Pete Domenici of New Mexico. Armed Services would go back to John Warner of Virginia. And Carl Levin would give that seat away. Foreign Relations has been, of course, Joe Biden of Delaware. That would go probably to Senator Lugar of Indiana. Now, Senator Lugar is also in line to become the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, but it would be thought that he might take over foreign relations and let agriculture go to somebody else, but that has not been determined. John McCain will go back to as the chairman of the Commerce Committee. Also, the Judiciary Committee, Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont would no longer be the chairman. The chairman would be Orrin Hatch of Utah. Again, things like that could be changing, but if you look at what it looks like right now and who the ranking minority people are with this change in the United States Senate. Again, the Senate coming back 51 Republicans, 46 Democrats, and 1 independent. 2 races, as we said earlier, yet to be determined. The Senate race in South Dakota, and then, of course, there'll be a runoff race in Louisiana because Mary Landrieu did not get 50% there. Next is Jacksonville, North Carolina. Good morning, Jacksonville.
This is actually Chapel Hill.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
This is a disaster for our country. Get ready to see a fascist state. The Republicans have looted the Treasury already. They're going to continue to loot the Treasury. This is just like what happened during the Reagan era. The Democrats, since the beginning of the Bush administration, have rolled over and played dead. We have a president whose grandfather helped build the Nazi war machine in Germany from the 1920s up through 1942, when his grandfather's company was taken over by the United States government because it was violating the Trading with the Enemy Act. You're going to see a long period of civil rights violations that are just going to be unbelievable. The Patriot Act is basically the same act as the Enabling Act of Germany in 1934 that took away all people's civil rights, allowed for continuous surveillance on anybody they wanted to incarcerate. You can put people in jail now with absolutely no charge, with no reference to lawyers, with no notification that they're there. We're looking at a fascist state.
And you're saying all of that is going to happen because
It's already happening. But we've already got a fascist state. We have.
Okay, thank you for the call this morning. We're going to go next to Fairfax, Virginia. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm ecstatic at what happened. What we've witnessed last night was the dismantling of the Democratic Party, and it was all caused by one family, the Clinton family. The Democrats have turned into the Clintocrats. The Democratic Party has turned into the Clintoncratic Party. And last night, what we witnessed was a total rejection of the Clinton years. What President Bush has shown, he's shown strong leadership. We finally have a strong leader, somebody who's willing to put it on the line for his party, and somebody that the United States trusts. And the people of this country, the majority of this country, know that he inherited a humongous mess, from economic to disaster to cutbacks in the CIA and the FBI to dismantling the military in this country. And we've risen, and we are furious about whenever we see the Clintons' faces on TV, it just fires us up.
Thank you. Bay Village, Ohio. Go ahead.
Well, I think what I don't understand is what seems to be a disconnect between what people say they want and what is needed to get them what they want. For instance, people don't want their taxes raised, but they want to have good education. We're already, terribly in debt. So where is all this money going to come from? I'm sorry to hear people talking about union bashing. Anybody who knows the history of unions knows that you have to have a balance of power, or big companies or anyone who wants to can just run right over workers. And I was a union person in a library. I mean, unions aren't all, what do I want to say, rapscallions. And I think that they were going to have the fact that we had this sniper these snipers, and it makes no translation into keeping guns, having research on people for their guns.
Thank you, Ohio. In your state, Governor Bob Taft has been reelected as governor. He's a Republican. Here's another list, some of the more names of the reelected governors. Mike Johans in Nebraska, Bill Owens in Colorado, John Rowland in Connecticut, Kenny Gwynn in Nevada, George Pataki in New York, Dirk Kempthorne in Idaho, Tom Vilsack in Iowa, Rick Perry in Texas, Mike Huckabee in Arkansas, Don Siegelman in Alabama, although that race is still being discussed this morning as being very close, and Gray Davis in California. I don't think that this Alabama race actually has been decided yet, but we'll get back to that. And again, just to remind you about the tally in the Senate and the House this morning. For the 108th Congress, the current tally is 51 for Republicans and 46 for Democrats. There's one independent and two races yet to be determined, South Dakota and Louisiana, where there will be a runoff in Louisiana. We're still waiting for the final results in South Dakota. And in the House, for the Republicans, it's 226, for Democrats 203, and one independent. There are 5 races yet to be determined there. From the Argus Leader in South Dakota this morning, David Krantz is writing about a variety of things, and one of the things he talks about is the future of Tom Daschle, now that he will no longer be the Senate Majority Leader. He writes this: it not only takes Daschle down on the national political ladder, it also may weigh on his future. Daschle really wanted the people to elect him to the majority leader's job this time, rather than have the job because of the decision of Senator James Jeffords, now an independent, to caucus with Democrats. It also may weigh against any decision by Daschle to run for president in 2004. He has been held back in fundraising for that candidacy because he didn't want to appear to be using his leadership job to help a presidential bid, and that would leave him 2 options: to either seek re-election to a 4th term or retire. On the House side, Democrats are also making some determinations over in the next few days. Congressman Dick Gephardt, the minority leader in the House, is said to be thinking about what his future is going to be, and may have an announcement in the next several days, too. Back to your phones. Burlinson, Texas is next. Good morning, Texas, a Republican.
Good morning. I'd like to thank Senator Daschle for taking his orders from the union thugs across the nation and leading his party right off a cliff. I think it's not going to be nearly as much fun for jumping Jim Jeffords and Frank Lautenberg as they suspected it would, and I'd also like to invite Link Chafee to go ahead and jump parties with his buddy Jim Jeffords, because we don't need him anymore.
You think he will?
No, because he's going to want to stay in the majority. He doesn't have the guts to do what his true affiliation is.
Let's go next to Glenview, Illinois. Hello, Illinois.
Hello, good morning.
How about the
I'm on a speakerphone because my wireless was running out of batteries.
Okay.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can. Your thoughts about your races as they came out last night?
Oh, it's a little upsetting to hear all of the venom coming from the Republicans who did very well last night. Because I'm, even though I'm a Democrat, I'm hopeful. I believe that most of the people in government are there to try and work and make things better, even if I don't agree with the way that they want to do it. I just like to make a couple of quick points. Now that they have all 3 areas of government, they have the executive branch, they have the Senate, they have and the House, and they already had the majority on the Supreme Court. A lot of people say that things take a lot of time to do, but certain things can happen right away, and I want both Republicans and Democrats to watch and see that, with the exception of a filibuster, which is a weapon that can only be used, can't be used that often, with the stroke of a pen, just like when they raised their own salaries, with the stroke of a pen, they could, if they wanted to, make laws to increase or change or fix veterans' benefits, military pay questions. Are they going to immediately do things that correct the budget issues and the deficit, alternative fuels, and our dependence on oil? Mm-hmm. All of those issues can be addressed with laws that they now have absolutely no excuse for not passing, and I want people to watch and see over the next 2 years, are those things and all of the other things that they routinely complain about actually have action that works. And 2 years from now, you need to ask ourselves, have they done that? Have they passed, go up and look and see, have they passed bills to fix veterans' benefits over the last 2 years?
Caller, can I ask you how you feel about your new governor?
Well, I actually voted for Jim Ryan. He's the only Republican I've ever supported. I like him much more than Blagojevich. He's a great man, and I'm very sorry he lost.
Here's the front page of the Chicago Tribune this morning, courtesy of the museum, with the governor-elect's picture on it, along with his father-in-law and his running mate. Some of the other front pages this morning, the Jerusalem Post is, of course, the prime minister there calling for early elections within 90 days. The Miami Herald, a smooth vote for Bush is what they say. Governor easily beats McBride. That's the front page again of the Miami Herald. The Globe and Mail out of Toronto is mostly local news there, but it's Canadian politics. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, we'll be talking with somebody there in just a few moments about the Roy Barnes race there and some of the surprises there. From the Kansas City Star, on the Kansas side, Kansans choose Sebelius, a picture of the new governor of Kansas, Kathleen Sebelius. It says relaxed in her home with her father, John Gilligan, who is a former Ohio governor. She's also the daughter-in-law of a former member of the Kansas House of Representatives, Keith Sebelius, from the western part of the state. And, of course, the tight race they talk about in Kansas City Star of Jim Talent winning over Gene Carnahan. In the Detroit Free Press, she's the boss, Jennifer Granholm, in her victory speech in Michigan last night. You can see her picture there. And from the Pioneer Press, we talked earlier, it's Governor Pawlenty. And then they ask, of course, the question, Coleman or Mondale. That has been determined. Norm Coleman has won in that seat. And in the Houston Chronicle, it's a grand old sweep, is how they put it. We are going to also give you a list and show you a list of the number of the United States senators who will be returning to Washington, re-elected in the United States Senate. Here they are. Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, Senator John Warner of Virginia, Senator Rockefeller of West Virginia, Senator Durbin of Illinois, Senator Kerry of Massachusetts, Senator Senator Cochran of Mississippi, Senator Sessions of Alabama, Senator Biden of Delaware, Senator Roberts of Kansas, Hagel of Nebraska, Inhofe of Oklahoma, Jack Reed from Rhode Island, Carl Levin of Michigan, Susan Collins of Maine, Max Baucus, Montana, Pete Domenici of New Mexico, Larry Craig of Idaho, Gordon Smith of Oregon, Mike Enzi of Wyoming, and Ted Stevens of Alaska. These are the re-elected senators for the next Congress. Well, we're now going to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in Atlanta, Georgia this morning. We have Jim Tharp here there, and he is going to give us some idea of what's going on in Atlanta this morning. But first of all, let's talk both about some of the surprises in Georgia last night. Mr. Tharp, first let's talk about your Senate race.
Yeah, you had a four-term congressman from Moultrie, Saxby Chambliss, defeated a veteran state politician, Max Cleland. It was Cleland's first term as Senate, but he'd served previously as a state senator and a Secretary of State, and he headed the Veterans Administration under Jimmy Carter.
How did that happen?
Chambliss had a very organized campaign. He had the support of the White House. President Bush actually spent 6 hours of very valuable pre-election campaign time here on Saturday, making 2 stops in the state. Chambliss had a very organized campaign, as I said, very well financed, and he pulled it off. It was supposed to be a toss-up. All the polls showed it as a toss-up. It looked like Chambliss was peaking at just the right time, and apparently that's what happened. You also had very bad weather here.
Really?
And that tends to mute Democratic turnout a bit. It has in the past. And it was horrible weather. It started raining almost at the time the polls opened, and it got progressively worse through the day. So that may have played a bit of a part, too.
Now, in Georgia also, the seated governor was defeated, Roy Barnes.
Which is much more of a shock. The polls had Barnes leading by over 10 points, and that was supposed to be a walk. Nobody in the state really gave the challenger much of a chance.
Who is Sonny Perdue?
Sonny Perdue is a former state senator, farmer, flies his own airplane, did not have very much money. Barnes had buckets of money. He had $20 million or so to spend on the campaign. Perdue had just a fraction of that. was not able to run much of a campaign. Barnes had been on TV with ads since before the Republican primary was over here. Purdue had to fight a very contentious Republican primary, and somehow he won. He probably benefited a great deal from the coattails of Saxby Chambliss. You've got to remember they were running on the same ballot. When Bush would come to town for Chambliss, he would always recognize Sonny Perdue, although that was secondary to his push to get Chambliss elected. But Bush was here 5 times during the campaign. 3 of those were specific campaign stops for Chambliss and through his surrogacy, Perdue.
Can I ask you very quickly about this House Speaker? You have a story here on the front page of your newspaper this morning about a Speaker of the House in the State House in Atlanta that has been on the job since '74?
Yeah, Tom Murphy was the longest-serving House Speaker in the country, and he was defeated, too. That's another pretty big shock, although it's not that big a shock. Murphy barely got by last time. His district, although it's a good distance geographically from Atlanta, is really on the fringes of the Atlanta metro area, and that area had gone more and more Republican in the last few years. Murphy's an old yellow dog Democrat of the Roosevelt era, and again, Metro Atlanta had eaten into his district in recent years, and that's probably what did him in.
Okay, thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with us this morning. We go next to Dallas, Texas. Good morning to you, Republican.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. What's your thoughts about everything that happened across the country and in your state?
I think everything has gone wonderful. I want to thank C-SPAN. I've been glued to you since this all started yesterday when voting started. And I want to thank the Democrats here in Texas that lost. They were very gracious. I didn't think they would be. I wish Tony Sanchez would go ahead and succeed the election, but I understand where he's coming from. Some of your callers are very vindictive, and we should be starting to really unite after 9/11. And I've lived all over the United States in my 62 years. I was blessed with parents that were called gypsies because they were in the construction business. And so I've seen a little bit of everything the United States has to offer. And I'm very proud of this country. And we are a true nation of loving people. And I want to thank George W. Bush. He called me when he was running for president when I was down, how they were treating him. And he said, don't give up. Everything will be all right. And it's come to pass.
Okay, thank you for the call. Here's a couple of the major races that were being watched yesterday. You may have already heard these results, but just in case you didn't. In the Arkansas Senate race, Mark Pryor, the Attorney General there, a Democrat, won over Senator Tim Hutchinson. In New Jersey, former Senator Frank Lautenberg, a Democrat, won over Doug Forrester. And in Iowa, the Senate race there, Senator Tom Harkin, a Democrat, winning over Greg Gansky, a Republican. The last race wasn't as close as some had thought that it might be. Next call, Lake Worth, Florida. Good morning, Lake Worth.
Good morning. I'm calling. I am a Democrat. I am disappointed. I do feel that events conspired against the Democrats. Of course, we have a president who has always assumed that he had a huge mandate and certainly acts as though he had a huge mandate, which he did not. He was an accidental president. But that is the hand we were dealt, and we are dealing with it. However, I also feel he ran under false pretenses. He ran as a moderate and has turned extreme. Certainly, in many instances, he has shown very little desire to act as the uniter he claimed to be. I am a little worried. I wish I know that the war on terror, etc., has unites people behind the current president. We are all Americans, and he had better remember that, too. And as far as one of your previous callers who spoke about Democrats lacking class, I think his remarks about a parade where the elephants march first and the Democrats clean up lacks a certain amount of class, too. Please, the Republicans tend to feel very self-righteous. We are equally as gracious under stress as you are. There has been a lot of hanky-panky that was tried down here, and however, we will go on. The country will exist. The next generations better watch out that the courts are not turned against what the majority of people want. And all I can say is, God bless America, and let's go on from here.
Can I ask you about caller? Are you there?
Yes.
Kathleen Harris. Excuse me, Catherine Harris.
Mm-hmm. What do I think of her?
Mm-hmm.
I think she's an extremely partisan person, as are all the Republicans in this state, starting with our governor and his family. I think that aside from the aristocratic demeanor that they carry off, they are extremists.
Thank you. Houston, Texas, you're next, Republican.
Hello.
Morning, Houston. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Boy, that woman apparently is not a native from Florida. She should go back where she came from. I'm thrilled that we won. We won because we worked hard, because we didn't go around spouting off that we're going to get Jeb Bush and we're going to get that guy in Texas to embarrass the president. That's exactly what that McAuliffe crook said, and I'm thrilled that we. By the way, one other thing: there's these chairmen of the Democratic Party. They were the accidental chairman put there by that weasel Jeffords. Thanks, Connie.
Thanks for the call this morning. Well, we're going to keep continuing to talk about all of this, but now let's go over to the hotline. Chuck Todd, good morning.
Good morning, Connie.
Boy, our viewers are already excited to talk about politics this morning, and
I think it's going to be a fiery couple of weeks following up this election.
Okay, well, let's get into it and talk first of all about what happened in Minnesota, because we just found that out about an hour ago. Any reaction that you're getting in terms of reasons why Norm Coleman beat the former vice president?
Well, everything we'd been hearing and seeing had been feeling and trending Norm Coleman. I think the Democrats will ultimately place the blame for their defeat on the reaction that the swing voter in Minnesota had to the Wellstone Memorial, which turned into this pep rally, which I don't think people have grasped outside of Minnesota. This thing was aired on the broadcast networks, channels out there in the Twin Cities, for 3 hours. So if you were not a Wellstone supporter, you were inundated with this, and it got the Republican base fired up, and it got them to the polls. And the reason, the evidence of that isn't necessarily in the Senate race, it's in that state's governor's race, where we saw Tim Penny, who was sort of going in the middle there. He's the former Democrat, he was the independent, he was Jesse Ventura's legacy, he was leading in the polls. All of a sudden, after that event, his numbers collapsed, and Tim Pawlenty, the Republican, surged, and he ended up winning that governor's race quite easily. And it shows you his vote of about 45%, I think it was, his ultimate winning vote. It shows you what that strong base that Coleman had, where you look at Roger Moe, who was the Democratic nominee for governor. He was at 35, and that's where Walter Mondale was starting. So I think the Republicans were fired up for this election.
Any more news about South Dakota this morning?
Nothing new, except we kept hearing last night that for some reason they may not have counted the absentee ballots yet, that they may have put off counting the absentees until the end, waiting to see everybody who's voted, so they wanted to double check to make sure they didn't double count. Somebody go to the polls and voted absentee, and they wanted to count everything at the polls first, then double check if they showed up at the polls and they see an absentee ballot. So there may be some absentee ballots that are out. If that's the case, you know, Democrats have been bragging about their absentee ballot capability, so it's a tenuous lead that Thune has in those couple thousand votes, and I don't think we can feel like it's trending one way or the other.
And the other outstanding Senate race is in Louisiana. What's going to happen there?
You know, this is going to be interesting because it's now not for all the marbles. Everybody had set up the scenario that, okay, if there's a Louisiana runoff and it's for control of the Senate, well, it'll be this nationalized race. Well, now it's a really, Mary Landrieu, the Democrat there, she's in a really tough situation. She's basically arguing to send her back to the minority. Send her back to being a junior senator from the minority party in the U.S. Senate. What is she going to be able to bring home to Louisiana? What promises is she going to be able to pull off where Susie Terrell, who's going to be her runoff opponent, neither one of them are technically nominees in the sort of the quirky Louisiana law, because it could have been two Democrats, for instance, if they had been the top vote getters that could have faced off. But anyway, Susie Terrell's going to have the president come in, going to be able to say, you elect me, or you know you're going to elect me to the Senate majority. It's going to be a very awkward, tough situation, and if Democrats are still licking their wounds over last night's events, they may not get the resources down in Louisiana that they need, because they need to marshal some troops out there in order to be able to pull this off. Louisiana is a very tough state for Democrats, and Mary Landrieu, you know, her first election took days, if not, I believe, more than a week to finally get her certified as the winner. It was that close.
We're going to step from the Senate over to the House, because I want to show you a list of the defeated House members and get any reaction that you have, Chuck Todd. Karen Thurman from Florida, Democrat, was defeated. Peter Visklosky from Indiana, defeated. Connie Morella, Republican of Maryland, defeated. Ronnie Shows of Mississippi was defeated. Jim Maloney of Connecticut, David Phelps of Illinois, George Gekas of Pennsylvania, and William Luther of Minnesota. George Gekas has been in Congress a long time.
He sure has, but this is the first time he actually had to run a real race. He hadn't run a competitive race for Congress in 20 years, I think 82 the first time, and even then he was just worried about the Republican primary. It was never having to appeal to general. He never really had ever run a campaign that had to be fought over the airwaves, had to be fought on television, and it just, you could tell he wasn't comfortable with it. It wasn't a medium that he was doing well, and Tim Holden, the Democrat there, ran a great race, but I tell you, Gekas came very close, a lot closer than anybody thought he was going to come to winning. A lot of people had Holden putting this race away a lot, and I think the reason Gekas got really close is Bush came in at the last minute, and it helped out a lot.
Chuck Todd's our guest this morning. We go to the phones with you. Dallas, Texas, Democrat. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Well, I am a Democrat, but I would like to say congratulations to the Republicans. They did a wonderful thing. They did pull it off last night. I am a little bit disappointed because I did think that we would do better than we did, but I do want to take my hat off to the Republicans. I don't understand yet what has happened in the race in Minnesota. Could you explain what has gone on with that? Did Mondale lose?
Mr. Todd.
Yeah, no, so far the Associated Press has said, is calling in for Coleman, says there's just not enough ballots left to be counted for Mondale to surpass. We've seen Coleman's lead grow as sort of the sun has risen out here this morning. It's gone from about a 20,000 vote lead. I think he's up to about 65,000 vote lead at this point.
And of course, in that same state, a Republican won as governor. Right,
which shows the just sort of I think illustrates, as I was telling you earlier, illustrates the Republican base turnout that they had, which was very strong in Minnesota.
Warner Robins, Georgia, you're next. Go ahead, Republican.
Well, I just wanted to call and say that I was frankly really surprised with the turnout and the way that the race ran in our state. I was very pleased. I'm actually a suburban housewife, and I heard somebody's comment early this morning on one of the major networks that with our state that maybe a lot of the suburban housewives had gone out to vote. I don't know what happened with that, but I'm a suburban housewife, and I voted for both Saxby Chambliss and for our new governor, Sonny Perdue. And a lot of the things for me were based off of the recent debates that they had aired on one of our local television channels. And I just want to say congratulations to both Saxby Chambliss and to our new governor-elect, and wish the best wishes to our exiting people, and hope that God will watch over them and our new leaders would be able to lead our state in a new direction after so many years of being under Democratic control.
Thanks. The loss of Roy Barnes, the sitting governor there.
Yeah, that was definitely the big upset of the night. You know what was odd about Georgia, and I just took a look at this because I was curious. A lot of times when you see a governor go down or one party win the governorship, they usually bring the other statewide officials, the other cabinet officials with them. It happens all, Barnes, when he won in 98, he swept a whole slew of folks in. Well, all those folks are running for re-election down there, and they all won. Georgia voters absolutely split their ticket. They voted, there's a good chunk of them voted Republican for Saxby Chambliss and for Sonny Perdue, and then voted Democrat for the Secretary of State's race, the Attorney General's race, all the way down the Lieutenant Governor's race. So Sonny Perdue's going to have a Democratic Lieutenant Governor, a Democratic Attorney General, a Democratic Secretary of State. It's very odd to see that, and I'm going to be very curious to find out why that happened. What did the down ballot guys do differently? What did Barnes do something to alienate the voters? It's going to be that's going to be one of the places we really want to dissect over the next couple days.
Baltimore Sun's front page this morning, a governor's race. Mr. Ehrlich, Congressman Ehrlich, winning the governor's race there over Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
Yeah, I think if you have somebody who want to know who ran the best campaign in the country, it's got to be Bob Ehrlich. I mean, he just always had her on the ropes, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. And she never was able to get out from under the shadow of either Paris Glendening or, she never had a primary fight, but she had a fight to make sure she didn't have a primary fight with the Baltimore mayor, Martin O'Malley. She couldn't shake that. There never was a comfort level among Democratic activists that she was a powerful standard bearer, and I think something happened. I mean, clearly folks went to the polls. They voted 2 congressional districts that were Republican-held seats, gave it to Democrats, ousted a Republican moderate in the mold that Ehrlich was trying to be, and yet in Connie Morella, and yet Ehrlich still won. So again, there's some interesting. It was clearly a repudiation of Kathleen Kennedy Townsend had less to do about party than.
From the House side, Connie Morella did lose. She's a Republican from Maryland whose race was close to Mr. Van Hollen, who will be the next congressman from that district. And this picture from the front page of the Washington Post this morning, back to Mr. Ehrlich in the governor's race in Maryland, shows him with his running mate, Michael Steele. It says that Mr. Steele is the first African-American elected statewide in Maryland state history. Next call is South Daytona, Florida. Go ahead. Democrat.
Yeah, thank you. I have a message for the non-voters and the people that voted Republican. I believe that people will regret it very soon, ever voting for a Bush name or a Republican. I believe the floodgates have been opened. Hang on to your seats. We're headed for the bumpiest ride in history. I'm very disappointed that McBride didn't win here in Florida, and I believe it was because he didn't hit back hard enough against the Bush attack ads and lies. When you fight against a snake, you hit back like a snake. Americans, it seems, now love attack ads. It's become an entertainment to them, so they deserve the government that they're going to get, and they're going to get it.
Hold on to your seats, Mr. Todd.
It's interesting, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. The White House, it's going to be a very interesting strategy. The next 2 years politically is all going to be about strategizing for President Bush's reelection. It was pretty easy how he would run a reelection campaign issue-wise had he been running against a Democratic Senate. It would have been very similar to what he did here. I need a mandate for my agenda. The Congress isn't doing anything. The Senate keeps blocking me. Well, now there's no excuses. Now it's Republican control. If you look back at recent history, Mr. Bush had all Republican, the Republican trifecta of the House, Senate, and the White House, all of 6 months. Bill Clinton had it only for 2 years. Jimmy Carter had it for only 4 years. It's not something that voters are comfortable with for a very long time, and it's a double-edged sword for the White House. Right now it's all joy, and it shows that he's very politically powerful, and Congress is going to have to sort of bow to the, I don't want to say bow to the White House, but sort of kowtow a little bit to the White House, because if it wasn't for President Bush, they wouldn't have the Senate. So it's not as if Congress can control the White House agenda. The White House agenda is going to control Congress, but it is going to be it is going to make the Democrats are going to be nothing but a loyal opposition, and it may make President Bush's reelection chances all hinge on what gets done over the next year.
From this morning's Washington Post, a picture of Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts kissing his wife, Teresa Hines, as he's claiming victory in his bid for re-election to the United States Senate. Our next call is from Marlboro, Massachusetts. Go ahead, Republican.
Yeah, it's good because on the front of the Boston Globe this morning it shows a great picture of Mitt Romney, who's the governor of Massachusetts now, and talk about John Kerry. Nobody really ran the popular race against him, so that's really not irrelevant. But for Republicans and for the Bush administration, this is a great day. Maybe we can get the right judges in some very seats that they need to be, and that the Republican agenda could be moved forward on, not just on the war on terrorism, but on the economy, to get tax cuts and get working people working again, and for businesses to start hiring people. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck Todd. The governor's race there, Mitt Romney winning, was it a comfortable lead?
It was a comfortable win, and you know where the Democrat there, Shannon O'Brien, she got hurt a little bit by a Green Party candidate that got about 5 or 6% of the vote. Romney did get over 50, so it didn't necessarily cost O'Brien the election, but it certainly made a 2 or 3 point race, made it a 10-point race.
Little Rock, Arkansas. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm so happy that we have a ray of hope because we got a Democrat back to the Senate. I'm a person who has lived through the Father Bush administration. I'm not trusting of the Bushes, but I'm going to say this much. They have an opportunity to prove themselves. If not, we can clean out the White House in 2004.
Caller, wait a minute here. I just want, okay, so you have Mark Pryor, the Attorney General there, who's going to be going to the Senate.
Yes.
And Governor Huckabee won re-election, right?
Yes.
And then what happened to your issue there? Didn't you have an issue, some resolutions there about taking the sales tax off food?
Yes, but the ramifications of it would have been devastating to a poor state like Arkansas.
So it lost?
So what?
It lost?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks very much. Next we go to Arizona, Cochise, Arizona. Good morning.
Yes, Connie. I'm really excited about what has happened, but what I would really like to say is that I'm 67 years old, and I have been a Democrat all of my life until this year. And I changed my my partisanship because I just couldn't agree with what was going on with the Democrats anymore. And Daschle, I think, played a prominent part in that, in the fact that he seemed to stop everything. I mean, everything was on the table, and nothing was being worked on. And I feel like that the Homeland Security, in particular, is something that we really have to get a handle on, because our economy and everything else, health care, of course, being a senior citizen, and that's important to me, but if we don't protect our country, then nothing is worth anything. I mean, you know, if we're not alive and well and healthy as a country, then the dollar really doesn't matter.
Chuck Todd, any indication as to whether Homeland Security issues had an impact in the election?
I think it had an impact in that Georgia Senate race. That was one of we saw ads on Homeland Security specifically on that issue in 2 Senate races. One was Missouri, one was Georgia. What were the results? Republicans won both of them. I think definitely it kept Saxby Chambliss in play. You know, that race was just teetering on the edge of whether it was still going to be in play or not. And the Homeland Security thing, it resonated in Georgia more so than it did in most states. They didn't really try it in other Senate races, so I think it definitely had a role in ousting Max Cleland.
Tennessee, the Senate race there. What happened, Chuck?
Lamar Alexander cruised to an election there. He defeated Democrat Bob Clement, who is the son of a former governor there, his father, Frank Clement. And it was probably about what a lot of Republicans thought it would be. The reason they recruited Lamar is that there was a worry that Democrats were going to win the governorship, as they did, because there was sort of this Republican, anti-Republicanism going because of the Republican governor outgoing Republican Governor Don Sundquist. People were unhappy because Sundquist was trying to get an income tax. So there was some nervousness with the National Party that if they didn't get somebody with the stature of Alexander, they wouldn't win that Senate race. And he proved that he still had the stature to carry it.
Johnson City, Tennessee, you're next up. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I'm calling the Democrat line, and I'm obviously very disappointed and angry. What's going on. I mean, there's a lot of different factors playing it, but I am just upset. And I hear these Republicans. One of them says, "Oh, we could come together." Well, there's no way. I've listened to your Republican callers, how nasty they've been. The last time I called you about 30 days ago, the very next Republican caller, is attacking me. You see, it's attacking, people. It's attacking the Clintons. It's attacking people. I'm very discouraged right now. I'm worried about which way the country is going to go. And they expect everybody to kowtow to Bush. Or you're not patriotic, you're not an American, and all this stuff. I mean, I'm calling you from Tennessee, but the race in Georgia is a prime example. Saxby Chambliss can win. He's questioning Max Cleland's patriotism, and Max Cleland, I believe, lost 3 limbs in Vietnam, if I'm not correct.
Thanks, caller. The issue of patriotism, we've talked about that over the last couple months almost. Do you think it played out in the election? We know it was used in some of the campaigns.
It was how can it not have? It was sort of the unspoken, the elephant in the room, as I think Jim Talent used to talk about other issues in that same thing. Every time President Bush came to a campaign event, he talked about the war on terrorism. He was invoking patriotism all the time in every one of his campaign stops. So sure, patriotism was a huge part of getting the Republican vote out, and I think that's how the Republican base got out. But one thing I think I want to caution folks here a little bit, and is there a Republican mandate? Yes, they won all these close elections, but they were all close. In some ways, this election was very similar to the last two, in that at the end, all the close races went one direction. And this time, instead of going Democrat, as they did in 98 and 2000, all the close races went Republican. So in some ways, okay, maybe we're not a 50-50 nation now, we're 50.5 to 49.5. So it's still very close. Just happened that Republicans won every single close race.
How many seats, governor seats, do Democrats pick up?
Well, at this point, they've only picked up, it looks like they've only picked up, right now, I have 11 guaranteed pickups. We still have 3 that have not been called. One is Arizona governor, and if the Democrats leading, and that would be a pickup. The other 2 are Oregon governor and Alabama governor. Both are Democratic-held seats. The Democrats are leading there, but literally only a couple thousand votes separate them. It wasn't as good of a night for Democrats for governors as they thought it would be. At this point, they're barely going to have a majority of the governorships, where there was talk a week ago that they might have a 5, 6, 7 seat advantage in the governorships. So Republicans did pretty well in the governors.
And 3 governors were defeated last night. Jim Hodges, a Democrat from South Carolina, Scott McCollum, a Republican from Wisconsin, and Roy Barnes, a Democrat of Georgia. Next 2 calls are from Georgia. First one, Black Shear, Republican.
Yes, this is for Chuck. The status on the question earlier when he was speaking on, we take 2 Democrats out and put Republicans in on governorship and Senate and kept everything else Democrat. I think, number one, the situation with the governor thing is that was our Georgia state flag had a major role in him voting and taking it out without the citizens really wanting to vote on their own. And I think that had a major part with Barnes' defeat.
It's interesting. The flag issue is something we'd kept following, and I think that the caller brings up a good point that there could be a lot more to that flag issue than maybe the Democrats thought there was.
Another call from Georgia, Quitman, a Democrat.
Yes. The previous caller makes a very good point. He really goes to the heart of the issue, which really is race. The Democrats have sort of lost their courage, in my estimation. Now, the flag issue in Georgia, most people were voting Republican in Georgia up until Johnson, the Voting Rights Act of 1964, the Civil Rights Act. Then those who were Republicans those who were traditionally Democrats went to the Republican Party. Now, it's not a Republican ideology economically per se, but it was one that switched over clearly due to race. And now this previous caller is discussing the flag in Georgia. What does that have to do with the war on terrorism? What does that have to do with the economy?
But Todd.
Yeah, no, this flag issue, I mean, both callers bring up good points when it comes with Barnes. I mean, it was always thought that it could be an issue, and, you know, he did sort of come up with this compromise. Everybody thought, oh, he gleaned right through it. I remember he got a ton of praise about how, oh, he politically handled this thing very well. It could very well be that when the history of this election's written, that it's the flag that took him down, because it is interesting that that the ticket was split, that the fact that they kept all the rest of the down ballots, it was clearly there was a group of voters who really wanted to take out Governor Barnes and had nothing to do with the rest of the Democrats that were holding office.
Well, let's check with our next caller, also from Georgia, Moultrie, Georgia. Do you think that the flag issue made a difference there?
I think it did make a difference, but I also think that the redrawn districts made a big difference. That the districts were really gerrymandered. Our district covered 5 counties, trying to keep the Democrats in, and I think it backfired. I think we would like our county to be able to vote together.
Well, I'll tell you, redistricting certainly backfired on the House level in Georgia. They had 4 seats that the Democrats thought they were going to gain out of redistricting. They only gained 2. They lost 2 that they thought they were going to win.
Next is Lorain, Ohio. Good morning, Lorain, Ohio, Democrat.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
I'm a lifelong Democrat, probably what you would call a conservative Democrat. And I am really upset with the Democratic Party. I feel like we have allowed the ultra-left-wing liberals to take over our party. And I'm talking about the pro-abortion, the anti-gun, the pro-gay. All these type of people have taken over our party, and I feel like they have alienated a lot of conservative Democrats like me, and this is basically costing us the election.
I tell you, the caller brings up something that I think is going to be at the heart of some of these ideological battles that we're going to see take place in just the next couple of weeks. If Congressman Gephardt indeed does not run for Democratic leader again, you're going to see a campaign between Nancy Pelosi, who is more liberal than Gephardt and more liberal than probably this caller is, versus a guy like Martin Frost, who's from Texas, a little more of a conservative Democrat, probably more in the mold of a new Democrat. And it is going to be on ideological lines that this battle to be the next House minority leader is going to shape up. And it's the biggest problem that Democrats have. Some people argue that they're not reaching out enough, that Democrats worry so much about maximizing their urban base that they have not figured out how to try to reach out and find sort of the weak Republican voter to win them over in the rural areas. And so it's, they thought they had made some progress on the gun issue this cycle. They did have some progress. They did win in a couple of southern seats in Congress, so it has to make them happy about that. But it's a long-term problem the Democrats have.
And for the Democratic leader in the Senate, Tom Daschle, what do you think his future is?
I tell you, he has always said there were 3 options for '04, and he said it himself. There was re-election to the Senate. His seat's up in South Dakota. There's retirement, and there's running for president. He hasn't had the best couple of months. A lot of people were upset that he hadn't been more out there on message. He'd been very much out there on political process. So at this point, I don't think there's going to be some sort of challenge within his party to his leadership in the Senate. But you'll see the next couple of months that he probably is going to weigh running for president or retirement, and those will be the 2 options he decides on.
Landover, Maryland. Duluth, Minnesota. You're next. Good morning.
Turn on Channel 10.
Good morning, Duluth. You're on the air.
Yes, this is Carlisle Eckhart from Duluth, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a Teamster Union, a Democrat, and I supported Hubert Humphrey, and we thought of him as God up here. And in 1978, Mondale, along with Carter, decided to give away the Panama Canal, and then the next big thing was truckers' deregulation, in which they tried to wiped out the Interstate Commerce Commission, And of course, you know, the ICC was very strong at that time. The big thing that there was I drove for Transport Inc. out of Moorhead, Minnesota. There was Indian Head Transport out of St. Paul, Minnesota. There was Princeell, there was Quickie, there was Rouen, Deline. All these transport companies were all Teamsters. And when they wiped out the truckers' deregulation, that meant all our contracts with all the refineries, from Coke Refinery in St. Paul or Northwest Refinery. There was Continental up in Renshaw, Minnesota, but it wiped that refinery out. There was Murphy. It meant the contracts that we had with Standard, Mobil, Union 76, it meant that was all gone. All our rights were gone. All our road rights were gone. It totally wiped out everything, and it wiped out the Teamsters Union. Of course, now Mondale came back into the country and into the state, was going to follow in for Paul Wellstone, and which was a sad occasion. But the one thing about it, he forgot about the Teamsters that remember that he backed up Carter at that time, and he followed in the coattails of Humphrey, and he wanted to come back here and be our senator. And as you know, about half hour ago, they announced that Norman Coleman is our new senator, and I'm very happy about that. I had a call the other night with Dave Durenberger, a former senator that I was on his steering committee, because I switched in '78. And, of course, it created quite a problem at first in the Teamsters to come in with a Teamsters jacket with some Republican, buttons on there. But eventually the Teamsters did tell us, and they sent out notes and everything, to vote for the Republican Senator Durenberger at that time, and I've stayed that way. And, of course, now I've sat back and watched everything that's been happening, and I'm very happy about it. But anyway, at least one thing that came through. You can't come back and rely on the sympathy and try to sneak back into the state like he did. And
thanks, caller. Any reaction, Chuck Todd?
It is somebody was pointing out that maybe sympathy, you can't rely on it alone when you look at Walter Mondale, Gene Carnahan, and Max Cleland, who all got, or they thought with Mondale, who all sort of were relying on sympathy to carry him over the top. They all lost.
Next call, Landover, Maryland, Democrat. Go ahead, Landover. Good morning.
Thank you. Hello.
You're on the air.
Thank you very much for receiving my call. I just want to commend C-SPAN for the wonderful coverage that they do, and I will not be looking at MSNBC and none of those other cable news channels anymore. But what I would like to say is that when the Republicans in their states are saying that they are received, that I'm glad we get our senator here. They're not their senator. What is his name? The one from South Dakota, Coleman. All of these are President Bush. They are handpicked by hand, and this has been said all over MSNBC. They were handpicked for Bush, so they're going there to represent Bush, to do what Bush want them to do, not to care about what happened in Minnesota, Missouri, and all the rest of and all the other states that he handpicked. And so, and again, one caller had called before. She has said that that we're going to get that these people are going to get what they wanted to get, and this is what they asked for, and this is what's going to happen. The people who did not go out and vote, I hear an 83-year-old man that tell me yesterday, I never vote. He wore it like it was a flag, and when he said that, I said the slaves didn't get to vote, and nor did the people who died didn't get the right to vote, and so you're not by yourself, sir. And so people better wake up and recognize that this is one America, and we better start living together and stop all this nastiness, all the nastiness.
Thanks, Landover. Thank you. We'll leave it at that. Any idea about turnout? She's talking about people and voting and
all over the place. Turnout, not surprisingly, was up in Texas. It was up in Florida. Those were very intense turnout efforts were there. Way down in California. Turnout was way down in Pennsylvania. Basically, where we saw where there were competitive, close races in the polls and in the press, turnout went up a little bit. In Maryland, it went up a little bit, for instance. And in Minnesota, it was way up. In places like California, Illinois, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, where the governor's races were considered blowouts, turnout went way down. Now, in California, turnout went so far down that Gray Davis was in doubt for a long time last night until finally he started pulling away at the end.
Chuck Todd, thanks so much for joining us from the hotline this morning.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
You got it.
Top of the hour again, we're going to go over what the Senate and the House tally is and talk a little bit about some of the results. We should note to you that the new Senate tally for the 108th Congress will be 51 Republicans and 46 Democrats with 1 independent. That means that the Republicans will take control of the United States Senate. There are 2 races yet to be determined, one in Louisiana, in which Mary Landrieu will be facing a runoff election because she did not receive 50% of the vote. The other one we're waiting on is South Dakota. We do not know yet what the result of that race will be. The results of the House of Representatives looks like this. There will be 226 Republicans in the United States House of Representatives, 203 Democrats in the 108th Congress, and 1 independent. There are 5 races yet to be determined. And the most recent race that has been called is in the United States Senate. Just a little bit earlier this morning, maybe about an hour and a half ago, they named that Norm Coleman has won over the former Vice President Walter Mondale in the Minnesota Senate race. Well, also a lot of attention went to Arkansas in this race, and Mr. Jeff Hankins joins us this morning. He is with Arkansas Business. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
How are you?
Still a little sleepy. It was a long night.
Okay. Senate race there first.
The incumbent, Tim Hutchinson, the Republican, lost this race. Attorney General Mark Pryor, son of former U.S. Senator David Pryor, pulled it out, margin about 54 to 46%. I think a lot of us thought it would be even closer than that, but Mark Pryor took the lead early and stayed ahead. And so obviously Arkansas went really against the tide in terms of going with the Democrat.
And your governor's race?
The governor's race, the incumbent Republican, Mike Huckabee, pulls it out. Again, interestingly, by the same margin, 54-46 over State Treasurer Jimmy Lou Fisher. Fisher being a longtime supporter of former President Clinton. And again, this race actually early in the evening was much tighter than the Senate race. I think that surprised a lot of people. But in the end, both Mike Huckabee and Mark Pryor winning by comfortable margins.
A seated senator losing.
I'm sorry?
A seated senator losing, or former senator.
Well, in this case, for Senator Hutchinson, the beginning of the end started whenever, during his term, he divorced his wife, later married a staff member. That really rattled his very conservative base. And then, of course, the negative advertising launched early in the summer, continued, and it was just a race that Mark Pryor continued to win on some key points. There was a big difference in the support for the minimum wage, which is a big concern for a lot of Arkansans, and he just pulled it out.
We heard when we visited Arkansas about the voting problems, possible problems in Pulaski County, which is the area right around Little Rock is based in, right? It's right around Little Rock. Did that come? Well, we know that came out, but what happened last night?
It was bizarre. I guess around 6:15, the Democratic Party had requested that Judge Collins Kilgore extend the polling hours from 7. Polls were to close at 7:30. Judge Kilgore granted an injunction to keep the polls open till 9 o'clock because several of the precincts had run out of ballots. Well, of course, the Republican Party was just furious. The Republican Party, by 9 o'clock, had apparently filed for an appeal with the state Supreme Court, and in a conference call about 9 o'clock, the state Supreme Court overruled the injunction. So, it's 9 o'clock, and you had the Pulaski County Attorney trying to decide what ballots were to be counted and which ones would not. It was just bizarre, and of course, what was also interesting is about 7:15, less than an hour after the judge had granted this injunction, filed by the Democratic Party, you had U.S. Representative Vic Snyder of the 2nd District, a Democrat, who had taped a phone message that was going out to their phone bank, automated, encouraging people, basically letting people know about the ruling and saying, hey, if you haven't voted, you have until 9 o'clock, so go vote. And, of course, the Republicans thought that this just smacked of some kind of foul play in terms of the way it seemed to be orchestrated. So it was a lot of drama in Pulaski County last night.
Any legal follow-up in all of that?
You know, I think because the races were not any closer than they were, you know, I'm not sure that we're going to see the candidates challenge. However, the parties certainly would get in there and probably want to wrangle with this a little bit more. And a lot of us have been calling for election reform in Arkansas, and I think the General Assembly in January, February will have to look at some changes.
Okay, Jeff Hankins, a publisher of the Arkansas Business. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Back to your phone calls. We go next to Richland, Washington, a Republican. Good morning. Go ahead, Richland.
Hi. Good
Hi.
morning. Now it's time for the Republicans to perform. We need Social Security reform. We need INS reform. We need we need tax reform, and we need to do something with the government unions. There's a lot of people up there that work that aren't doing their job. In fact, the whole federal government is racked with fraud, waste, and abuse and corruption. And this is our taxpayers' money is being thrown down the toilet up there, and this needs to be straightened up. Now, I hope they do this. And up here in Washington, they let that young Malveaux kid go on a bond now, and he turned out to be a sniper. But in this state, the big thing here was they wanted to raise our gas tax 9 cents over 2 years. And that went down big.
A vote that you had?
And that went, well, there's a lot of on referendums on there, but that went down real big. People are just tired of being taxed to death. I mean, even the state government has to tighten its belt. I mean, everybody's tightening their belt, and the government's just out there spending money hand over fist. And this has to stop now. I don't know. If Republicans don't do something about these things, I won't be voting. I already, told my congressperson, if they don't start doing something about what's going on up there in the federal government, especially with the immigration problems that we have. Our borders are wide open, and anybody could get in. We really need to do something about this.
Okay, thank you. Let's go next to Tyler, Texas. Good morning, Tyler.
Good morning.
You're on the air, sir. Go ahead. What do you think about the elections?
I take my hats off to everyone who won, Democrats and Republicans alike. But I'd like to say that I'm kind of disappointed with the Democrats because of the attack ads, because I feel like two wrongs don't make a right, and I just hate that our kids are coming up that's going to be the next voters and have to listen to all that crap on TV every time you turn around. And I am going to back George Bush because, as being a veteran, we always had to support the commander-in-chief, and I hope that the Republicans can take the government and turn it around because it's time.
Thank you. There's a new governors in several of the states. Here's the list of them from Illinois, a Democrat, Rod Blago. I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce that in the next couple of days. It's Blagojevich, I think is how it's pronounced. Craig Benson, a Republican of New Hampshire. Ed Rendell, Democrat of Pennsylvania. Mitt Romney, Republican of Massachusetts. Mark Sanford, a Republican of South Carolina. All those are new governors. Also, Mike Rounds is a Democrat, Mike Rounds is a Republican from South Dakota. Kathleen Sebelius, a Democrat of Kansas. John Baldacci, a Democrat of Maine, formerly of in Congress. Jennifer Granholm, a Democrat of Michigan. Bill Richardson, a Democrat of New Mexico. And then you have the new member from Rhode Island, the new governor from Rhode Island, who's a Republican. It's Carcieri, Donald Carcieri. Phil Bredesen, a Democrat from Tennessee. Brad Henry, Democrat from Oklahoma. Jim Doyle, a Democrat of Wisconsin. Sonny Perdue is a Republican of Georgia. And then a name you might know, Frank Murkowski, former senator, or senator now, will be the new governor there, Republican of Alaska. Tim Pawlenty is the new Republican governor of Minnesota. Dave Freudenthal is the new Democratic governor of Wyoming. And Linda Lingle is the new Republican governor of Hawaii. There were 3 defeated governors in the races yesterday. One was from South Carolina. His name is Jim Hodges, Governor Hodges, a Democrat. Governor Scott McCollum of Wisconsin was defeated, a Republican, and Governor Roy Barnes, a Democrat of Georgia, was defeated. Next call is from Del Rio, Tennessee. Good morning, Del Rio.
Good morning. This is my first time calling in, and we are a divided household. So I am tickled to death this morning, and my husband's miserable. However, I called to say that I've not heard anybody mention when they say, well, what happened with the Democrats. I think it's time maybe that we look that there is some grassroots Christian movements that are getting people to the polls that have never been to the polls. And for the Democrats, I hate to see this country divided, period. However, I think if they would start to focus more on moral issues and things that hit close to home, they would probably run away with everything, and there wouldn't even be a Republican left standing. But they kind of stand on one side, the Republicans stand on the other. And I know so many Democrats that now cannot, with conscience, vote a Democratic ticket because of the liberal stand that they take on godly issues.
Thanks, Tennessee. We'll go next to Athens, Georgia. Good morning, Athens.
Yes.
Democrat, go ahead, sir. Your thoughts on what happened yesterday, how it impacts your party and your issues you're interested in.
Well, I think it impacts my party significantly, and it's all negative. And I believe that a lot of this the Democrats brought on themselves. And some of it I've listened to callers talking about gun control. It goes back at least 3, 4 congressional elections before, in an off-year period. A lot of Democrats lost their seats at that time. I think we need to have some type of gun control, but I think they've gone way overboard. They don't enforce the laws that they have. I feel that here in Georgia, Sonny Perdue upset Roy Barnes partly because of the flag issue, and I think it was a major part of it. And I believe that it shows that here in Georgia, in the Deep South, we still are divided along racial lines, and I think that that's something that we need to look at. So, come together as a nation, we can't even come together as a state on issues concerning education, which is primary. There is no equal enforcement of laws, even to this day in Georgia, along those lines. It's a lot of counties still do things about racial things. However, the major problem that we're going to be faced with this time, the Democrats have lost. The Republicans have won, and I think it's definitely a referendum on the Republicans that they need to now come in here and straighten out some of the domestic issues as well as our foreign policy. And I say domestic issues, I'm talking about prescription drug coverage. I'm talking about taxation. After all, when they come into office, we not only had a balanced budget, we had a major surplus. And there are a lot of us that are still wondering about the question of Americans' patriotism, as they did in Max Cleveland's case here in this state.
Thank you very much. We're going to let it go at that. We have a lot of people on the line. We're going to go next to Bixby, Oklahoma, a Republican. What happened to Steve Largent there?
I don't know. It's the last time I checked, and I stayed up till about 12:30 last night. It was a dead heat, and there was less than about 400 votes difference. I think they're going to go in and actually probably do a hand count of the votes to see what can happen. I haven't seen any more results today. I know some of the western counties out in the Panhandle still had to be tabulated. Most of the rural counties normally go Republican. So once those are tabulated, he might win by less than 100 votes.
Were you surprised at how close this is?
No, I wasn't. I really wasn't. I like Steve Largent. However, I don't think he did a very good job in getting his message out. I heard more from the independent Gary Richardson and the Democratic candidate than I did Largent, and that was really surprising. I live here just south of Tulsa. Largent's from Tulsa, and he wasn't really a factor in the community in terms of communication.
Thank you for the call this morning and that update. Here's the front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Ed Rendell has been elected the governor. He is the former mayor of Philadelphia. Next call is Fort Worth, Texas. Good morning, Fort Worth.
Good morning. I'm really good morning. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Go ahead, please.
Yes. I'm really concerned with the Republicans having the presidency and the House and the Senate. We need to remember that President Bush, the minute he came into office, signed that executive order to make his father's papers secret. And I'm also concerned that we may be hit again by the people that do not like us or supposedly hate us. We are loving American people, both the Democrats and the Republicans, but we need to look at our policy. I remember so clearly when President Bush first became president, they asked him about the Middle East crisis, and he smirked. I remember so clearly, and I became very fearful because he smirked, and he pretty much gave the impression, let them duke it out themselves. And I think that policy and that behavior is going to cause us to have another disaster. And I think his running around and campaigning instead of really looking at our policies and thinking things through. And I had a concern when Saudi Arabia came down to Crawford, Texas, and they were not asked any questions. We don't know what they talked about because the reporters were not given an opportunity to ask questions to Saudi Arabia's representatives, and the president said very little. And now Saudi Arabia is saying that they're not going to allow us to have bases there in case we go to Iraq. And so that tells us a lot as far as their relationship to us, and also why the Arab countries, I think the Middle East is really our main problem. We Americans are loving people, and I think we love our country, but I think we have to be very careful about this president. And now with the Republicans being handpicked, I hope they're going to be strong enough to vote their conscience and not just have to go along with their president because he handpicked them. That's something.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Next is to Bel Air, Maryland. Good morning, Bel Air. I'm sorry. Yeah, Bel Air, Maryland. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I just want to thank C-SPAN for you are the eyes in which we watch what the Senate and the Congress do every day. And I think what's happened here is I think that a lot of the citizens are tired of watching the bickering and the getting of nothing done. And they want things done. I think that's exactly why these tables have turned. They're tired of the ridiculousness of stopping, the president's agenda from getting through.
Thank you for the call. We go to California next. Is it Placerville?
Hello?
Is it Placerville or Placerville?
Placerville.
Placerville. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, this is from the little-known election state. Unfortunately, we have reelected our Democratic governor here, who has economically run us into the ground, and now we're looking forward to 4 more years of this. Did desperately wish that the president came out our direction to help campaign for Mr. Simon out here, who lost. I'm an independent
Would it have made
voter.
any difference?
What's that?
Do you think it would have made a difference?
It was about 200,000 votes that separated the two candidates. I haven't actually seen any results this morning, but at the time I was watching, it was about that much.
Here's just so you can see here, for our viewers, here's some pictures from this morning's national edition of the Los Angeles Times. Go ahead, caller.
Okay. Do you happen to have the difference between the two?
I do not, but I can take a look while you talk.
I'd love to hear it from somebody today.
All right. I don't know if I can find it, but I'll go ahead and give a look.
Our governor has actually created an electric rate crisis here in California that is $12 billion in debt. The state is actually $12 billion in debt. We're going to issue bonds and attach that to ratepayer bills who've already been strapped with exorbitant numbers, all because government got involved in the wrong way and had spent money foolishly, and here we are. And I was so hoping that we would have had some turn in government and some fiscal responsibility, and we just lost that here.
Okay, thank you for the call. Let me just tell you that according to the Associated Press, the Governor Gray had 47%, Mr. Simon 42%. Those are the percentage numbers as of this morning from the AP. Next call, Seattle, Washington. Good morning, Seattle.
Good morning. This is Jean Clary, and I just want to, I'm just thrilled because now I think that our president will get the support that he needs, and that my hope and prayer is that the Supreme Court justices will be placed and make godly decisions. And this, God did create this world, and this is a nation that was founded under godly principles, and there was one nation under God. and it was the money is even in God we trust. And my hope and prayer is that what God says in His Word is that my people, if my people will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will heal their land. And that's what we need.
Thank you very much, Seattle. Let's take another call this is from Tullahoma, Tennessee. Good morning, Tullahoma.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I appreciate CSPAN and for having me on this morning. Talking about why the Democratic Party, I think what has happened in the Democratic Party, and I know personally myself, is I have family members that will say, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I go and vote or not. And I think people need to wake up and realize, Democratic and Republicans alike, it does matter to be registered. It does matter to get out and vote, because the laws that are set forth are the laws that we have to abide by, whether it be Republican or Democrat. And I have no message. I'm kind of sad this morning because I am a Democrat, but I think people need to unite together and to get out and vote, and I think that will make a difference if they will do that. Years ago, I remember that my family used to go and pick up people and take them to the polls and stuff to make sure they had a way, and I think we need to just push forward, and for the next election for president, and the Democrats need to unite and just go forward with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me give you an idea of what the Senate and House makeup is on this day after the 2002 election. In the Senate, it has turned Republican. 51 majority for the Republicans, 46 for the Democrats, and 1 independent. There are 2 races yet to be determined, and those 2 races are the South Dakota Senate race and the Louisiana race, in which there will be a December 7th runoff. In the House looks like this: 226 Republicans in the 108th Congress, 203 Democrats, and 1 independent. There are still 5 seats yet to be determined there. Well, we're now going to go by phone and talk a little bit with Tim Craig of the Baltimore Sun. Good morning, Mr. Craig.
Good morning.
Well, Baltimore and Maryland, an interesting race, both in your governor's race and in some of the congressional races. Let's start first with the governor's race. What impact do you think it will have for the Kennedy family that Kathleen Kennedy Townsend has lost?
Well, I think it's fairly significant. She really is one of the last Kennedys out there, and she was expected to win quite easily a few months ago, and now I think everyone would agree her political career is probably finished for good.
You don't think that she has any plans on running again?
I don't think if she would, I don't think she could win a primary in Maryland. Again, Maryland's a very Democratic state, so I think a lot of Democrats are going to view her as a candidate responsible for this loss, and I don't think she could win another primary.
How badly did she lose?
She lost by about 3 percentage points, which is fairly significant in a state where Democrats outnumber Republicans by 2 to 1. Congressman Ehrlich, the Republican candidate, won by racking up huge margins in the Baltimore suburbs and the rural areas of the state, where he won between 60 and 80% of the vote in most counties. She won 3 counties, the Washington suburbs of Prince George's and Montgomery and Baltimore City, but turnout was not extremely high there, so in the end, the Baltimore suburbs ruled the day.
And talk a little bit about Connie Morella's seat, the congressional seat that was lost in Maryland.
Yeah, actually, Connie Morella lost, and actually the Democrats picked up 2 seats in Maryland, Connie Morella's seat and Congressman Ehrlich's seat, which he left to run for governor, that also went to a Democrat. Connie Morella's seat came down to people there liked her. It was a fairly liberal district, and she's a fairly liberal Republican. But in the end, the voters decided they wanted a Democrat, hoping that the Democrats could regain control of Congress, which we all know did not happen. But that was very strong to many of the voters down in Montgomery County.
Okay, thanks very much. That's Tim Craig from the Baltimore Sun joining us this morning with an update on some of the elections in Maryland. Well, Tim Curran is with us for the next half hour. He is with Roll Call, and which is the newspaper of Capitol Hill. Biggest surprise of last night for you?
I think the biggest surprise was probably the events in Georgia, both Governor Roy Barnes and Senator Max Cleland losing. I think the Cleland race was not entirely unexpected, but I think the Barnes race is a real shocker. I mean, this is a guy who's discussed as a possible presidential candidate, excuse me, in 2 years, and I don't think anybody saw that coming. I think what that points to is probably disappointment with Democrats in the Senate, in particular on Homeland, excuse me again, Homeland Security. I think that issue resonated more than Democrats expected.
I want to run through in the Senate, because that's where the major news is from, what's going to be happening in terms of the chairmanships of some of the committees. Maybe you can give us some insights there. And just in grabbing some of them, are most of them going to go back to the same people that we saw the last time Democrats were in control?
Well, that's going to be the case with a few exceptions. Excuse me. Senator Murkowski, obviously elected governor, so he'll be stepping aside at the Energy and Resources Committee. We're going to see Don Nichols, who was has been the Republican whip, probably step into the Budget Committee, and Senator Domenici moving over to Energy. Those will be the biggest changes, I think.
Why would Senator Domenici move over to Energy and not go back to Budget?
I think that in New Mexico in particular, it's a state with a lot of energy generation and technology issues. I think he'll probably feel like he can do more for his state from that perch.
Richard Lugar would he choose foreign relations over agriculture, which he would also be eligible for?
He has in the past. Senator Jesse Helms sort of bumped him out of the foreign relations role, and I think that's really where his expertise lies. I would be surprised if he didn't take that role.
So who might be the head of the Agriculture Committee?
Gosh, I'm trying to remember who's next in line at this point, and
that's
I believe...
a good question. I don't have the list in front of me.
I think Senator Grassley might be in line for that, but he is also on finance, obviously, so...
It's interesting that, a senator can only have one chairmanship.
Yes.
And he also can he be a chairman of a committee and also be a member of the leadership?
That's generally not the case. Right now, Trent Lott doesn't sit on any committees, but, what you see is a lot of committee decisions made by the leadership. So, Senator McConnell currently chairs the Rules Committee. He's probably likely to move up to the spot that Don Nichols is leaving as whip, and will then open up that Rules slot as well.
So what is going to be the mood on Capitol Hill when they all return?
Well, it depends which side of the aisle you sit on, obviously. I think, Republicans already, ebullient this morning. Trent Lott was having a press conference at about 7 o'clock this morning to sort of lay out his agenda. The first decision they're going to have to make, obviously, is what they want to do about a lame duck session. I think there's going to be a lot of sentiment to try to, especially with reading the results of this election, move on Homeland Security, probably move on some of these judicial nominations that have been bottled up. They're going to have at least the one extra vote of Jim Talent. Governor Jesse Ventura's appointment to the Senate, Dean Barkley, suddenly becomes a potentially significant player in all this. And we'll have to see what happens with Norm Coleman when he's eventually seated. But I think that Republicans are going to try to ride this to a few short-term victories. They may put off some of the appropriations decisions, but I would be surprised if they didn't move on Homeland Security at least.
Senator Landrieu may be kind of busy in Louisiana?
I think I don't think Democrats need any more bad news today, but I think this is very bad news for her. She could be forced, first of all, into a number of difficult votes, particularly if Republicans do decide to take any action on judicial nominations that could potentially alienate, the African-American base in that state, but otherwise, sort of put her out of step with the state at large. And probably the broader problem for her is that she's going to have sort of a demoralized donor and activist base in the Democratic Party, and it'll be interesting to see how much they can rally after a defeat like this.
First call for Tim Curran is from Lakeland, Florida. Go ahead, Lakeland. Good morning.
Hi there. I'd like to ask your guest, Tim, 3 observations that I had, and if he saw the same observations. I noticed that I think what hurt the Democrats' observation 1 is you look at talk radio. Clear Channel's got 1,600 radio stations, and all you saw was them bashing the Democrats. There is no fairness doctrine anymore, so it was like probably worth $100 million in free advertising. Number 2 observation that I noticed, the last month before the investigation, before the election, we had the sniper and we had the war with Iraq. People look at CNN as balanced coverage, but we all know that AOL Time Warner's being investigating for cooking the books. They've been incredibly soft on George Bush. I mean, how could his approval ratings go down when you look at all this weak coverage of what a poor president he is, and with the economy? And third, Max Cleland and all those Democrats that got beat in Georgia. It's interesting that Georgia's got the most conservative Democrats. These guys, in any other state would be considered Republicans. Perhaps the Democrats might learn that they actually should try to give people a choice and move somebody to the left. I mean, Max Cleland, the guy's got one arm missing and two legs, and Saxby Chambliss, who was a draft-dodging chicken hawk, gets to walk and call him on his patriotism. And nobody in the news media ever went after Saxby Chambliss being a chicken hawk.
Thank you.
I think sort of taking the first 2 points as one about talk radio and sort of the cable news outlets, there's an enormous amount of frustration among Democrats. I mean, you might have seen Senator Daschle this morning saying, where was the coverage of our alternative economic plan? I think there was a lot of disappointment about that. You know, a lot of the critics would argue that Democrats never really had a coherent economic plan to counter Bush with, but I think they figured with the stock market problems and everything else that the sniper coverage might have been a little bit excessive in particular and really blunted any advantage they might have had on those issues in the closing weeks. And I think to your last point about Georgia Democrats, I think you're going to hear a lot of criticism from the left in the party of the way Democrats did sort of hew to the middle on most of these issues, and they'll see it as a renewed call for a more sort of liberal activism and sort of, you know, aggressive opposition to President Bush.
Next call is from Newcastle, Pennsylvania, a Republican. As we show you the front page again of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Ed Rendell, winning his bid to become the first Philadelphian elected governor of Pennsylvania in nearly 90 years. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you so much for providing such clear coverage. I just want to make a couple observations, and some of it agrees with many of the callers that you've had so far. I think the driving force behind some of the change in the House and the Senate has been people's concern with the continuing bickering between both parties, and the fact that the Democrats, ever since the presidential election, have sought ways to discredit President Bush's not only credibility but the mandate of the people for him. I think also that people were concerned about the moral vacuum in America, where we've seen situations like Columbine, this recent sniper attack, and various other issues with pornography and just a general degradation of the populace, to where people were kind of looking for solutions for things on the homeland as opposed to a global picture. And finally, I think the economy, I think the Democrats tried to paint the Bush administration as the cause of Enron and WorldCom and various other industries, when this was a cancer within the American business community that's been going on for years unaddressed, and finally now it's on the table. And that's just my observation. I just feel that the people are just sick and tired and wanted to see solutions put on the table instead of constant finger pointing by both parties.
Thank you.
You know, I think what I take from what you're saying is that a lot of Democrats are going to see this as an election that was really about missed opportunities. You know, the economy has obviously softened considerably since President Bush took office. The stock market's better lately, but has been very bad. You know, precipitated in part by the corporate scandals. I mean, a lot of Democrats tried to seize on this issue of corporate responsibility, and you know, they just found that they were not gaining any traction, particularly in the face of this discussion of homeland security and especially the potential of a war with Iraq. I think that created an environment, sort of the emphasis on foreign policy toward the end, created an environment where it was very hard for Democrats to come up with, you know, their solutions that could get through a narrowly divided Senate, and then, you know, obviously a Republican-controlled House, and to the president. I mean, I think Democrats are sort of, you know, spitting in the wind on a lot of these things, and it's easier said than done to have them come up with solutions to a lot of these problems.
Dover, Delaware, Democrat.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
How are you? And good morning, Tam.
Morning.
First of all, I would like to say a lot of people are saying that they're looking at this as what happened. First of all, I feel that what happened, first, the race in Georgia with Max Cleland, the triple amputee. I'm a veteran myself, and I've served my country. And if it's one thing that I detest more than anything, it's to have a candidate who has never served question the patriotism and the loyalty of someone who has served and has lost limbs. Second of all, it makes me very angry, and I thank you, Tim, for saying something a minute ago when you said African American. First of all, you do not question my loyalty as a veteran to my country and my patriotism. You do not question what I am an African American. I am proud of that. I'm proud to be a Democrat, and I'm proud to be a veteran. And the divisiveness that the Republicans have created in this nation is going to destroy us as a people. You are not the president for some of the people. You're the president for all of the people. You are not a senator for some of the people. You are a senator for all of the people. That includes black, white, brown, red, and yellow, whether you like it or not. And you have to learn to respect all of the people of your state and all of the people of this nation.
Dover, Delaware, thank you. We'll leave it at that. Tim Curran.
I think, again, to the point of the Chambliss-Cleland race, just as an observer, and I think a lot of observers felt the same way, when we saw the sort of ferocity of the ads that were coming from Saxby Chambliss's campaign and from the Republican Party in the sort of the 11th hour of this campaign, you know, there were sort of vague comparisons between Cleland and Saddam Hussein made almost. A lot of us were surprised, and a lot of us thought that those would backfire. In the end, obviously, they didn't, and that's why I point to this this issue of Homeland Security, which, you know, Democrats made a calculated gamble on, and Republicans obviously thought they had an issue they could exploit. And it is something that I think a lot of people were surprised to see Republicans take as far as they did in attacking the patriotism, essentially, of a severely wounded veteran.
Atlanta, Georgia, you're next.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
I've been just listening to you since 7 a.m. this morning. I'm calling about the race in Georgia for governor and senator. You know, one thing that nobody seems to want to talk and keep into account, we had a very, very popular congresswoman here named Cynthia McKinney who had statewide and nationwide appeal. And for what had happened, because I was a lifelong Democrat, but I recently became Republican, but I saw, and a lot of my friends, a lot of my constituents saw how the National Democratic Party and State Democratic Party completely abandoned Cynthia McKinney, somebody who people really love and respected. So that's in a signal to black folks.
What happened in that district?
Well, in that district, the National Democratic Party did not support Congresswoman McKinney. The State Democratic Party governor, nobody came out and supported. They all abandoned her to send a signal, even though how much you love and respect her, we cannot support her. So in turn, this is a backlash toward the national and the state and local. So that's why Max Cleland, in my opinion, lost, and so did Governor Barnes, because the 4th Congressional District has the largest voting bloc. And that's who's been putting Democrats in power for years, but they abandoned that base, and really what they did to Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney is a beginning of a backlash of a whole different process of they will no longer take the black vote for granted. We're moving more toward independent, more of that which represents our interests. So this is one thing I see.
Thank you.
I think that's really an excellent point. One of the things that was talked about in the days before the election was the fact that the usually very effective turnout of African-American voters in Georgia was in some doubt because specifically of Congresswoman McKinney's defeat in a primary. She lost to a state judge named Denise Majette, who was viewed as more moderate than Cynthia McKinney. Cynthia McKinney obviously made some sort of inflammatory comments about 9/11 and about the Bush administration's role in that and reacting to it. Majette was supported sort of tacitly by Zell Miller, a very conservative Democrat, and another number of other Democrats who are sort of closer to the center. She essentially left the party after her defeat. She has even talked about running for the presidency as a Green Party candidate in the future. And I think it's entirely plausible to say that the lack of an aggressive turnout operation in that district, you know, the result of the general election in the 4th District was a fait accompli after the primary, and without McKinney and her allies out there working aggressively, I think that definitely could have contributed to it, as could have the fact that Charles Walker, who's a prominent state legislator who had some of his own problems and had his son running in a seat that was supposed to go for Democrats. Champ Walker, his son, ultimately lost after some things surfaced about his legal record and things like that. I think that definitely could have undercut Democrats in the state.
A lot of attention this morning on the new members of Congress, but we want to make sure that you also know which members of Congress are coming back who were reelected, at least in the Senate side. Here's the list. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, Senator Warner of Virginia, Senator Rockefeller, Durbin of Illinois, John Kerry of Massachusetts, Senator Thad Cochran, Jeff Sessions, Joe Biden, Pat Roberts, Chuck Hagel, Jim Inhofe, Jack Reed, Carl Levin, Susan Collins, Max Baucus, Pete Domenici, Larry Craig, Gordon Smith, Michael Enzi, and Ted Stevens. All those members re-elected yesterday in their states rather. Erie, Illinois, Independent. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm rather pleased at the outcome, not necessarily because Republicans gained seats, but because it confounded the pundits who just knew that how everything was going to come out, and it didn't. Number two, our new governor, if you change the J to Y, you could probably get it, because everybody in the state couldn't pronounce it when he first went in to be elected. Of course, he is from Chicago, and as we know, Chicago is the tail that wags the dog. And that is essentially, oh yes, they have been not able to pass a budget because of the wrangling, I suppose, on both sides. And I think a Congress, and I'm taking both houses, that can't get a budget through should have a little house cleaning. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I know it's Blagojevich. Did I do it right this
You
time?
got it.
Because I
That's
really
right.
blew it earlier. Here's a picture of him from this morning's Chicago Tribune.
It's an interesting race. It's been a long dry spell for Illinois Democrats in governor's races, and I think a lot of people were surprised to see, a guy who's established a fairly liberal record and is a product of Chicago, which can be sort of poison in a general election, moved to such an easy victory. I think it was largely born of the problems that Republicans have, the one Ryan administration spilling over onto the Republican who tried to succeed him. And obviously, one of the interesting things about Blagojevich's elevation to governor is that he was replaced by Rahm Emanuel, who was a prominent voice in the Clinton administration, and I think is already probably emerging as somebody who's going to be have a lot to say about what House Democrats do over the next 10 or 20 years.
Easy win for Dick Durbin in Illinois?
Easy win. His biggest concern was that the gentleman running against him, Mr. Durkin, had a very similar name, and there was a little bit of an effort to make sure nobody got those confused.
Lakeland, Michigan, Democrat. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm very proud to be in Michigan, and I have a message to all liberal Democrats. Stand up and fight against Bush, because look what happened to my state. I wrote emails to Carl Levin, to Stuback, to Debbie Stabenow. No blank check to the cowboy. They listened to us. They responded. Levin won over 60% in our state. Stuback over 60% in our state, and we have a female governor. I knew all along that you fight Bush and you do not compromise. I am proud of Michigan.
Detroit Free Press front page this morning has this picture of the new governor, Jennifer Granholm.
I think the point about liberal Democrats is very interesting. I think there is a lot of dejection. You can just look at the faces of Mr. Gebhardt, Mr. Daschle, a number of other, Terry McAuliffe this morning. They're obviously very disappointed in the results. And I think it could actually bear on the decisions that are going to have to be made in the next couple of months by a lot of Democrats about whether they're going to pursue the White House. I think right now, Dick Gebhardt is essentially on the clock. We could hear something any day from him about his future in the House and whether he's going to run for president. But again, you think about the last Bush administration, the fact that, the first President Bush was riding high in the polls, just, about 2 years out from his first re-election bid, looked unbeatable, and ultimately, of course, Bill Clinton beat him. So I think that once this sort of passes, we get through the Louisiana race, I think you'll see an aggressive contest among Democrats to take on Bush in 2004.
And if Mr. Gebhardt decides not to run,
we have a leadership race all ready to go already. I think the conventional wisdom is that Nancy Pelosi, who just became the whip at the beginning of this Congress, the second ranking spot in the Democratic Party, probably has the inside track to replace Mr. Gebhardt as minority leader. She will have to face Martin Frost, who's a Texas Democrat, a real insider in the House, and someone who is probably a little bit more moderate than Nancy Pelosi.
and on the Senate side, what's your take on the future of Tom Daschle?
I don't think this is good for, if he had presidential aspirations, and it's something that's been kept very close to the vest, I don't think this is a real shot in the arm for those. Particularly it looks like his home state colleague, Senator Johnson, is going to go down, which is sort of a repudiation of the argument that they were making that re-elect Tim Johnson to keep Tom Daschle as majority leader. It's going to be a tougher sell for Tom Daschle at this point.
Next, Philadelphia. Good morning, Republican.
Good morning. It looks like we had a number of Republicans voting Democratic, and we have Rendell. A couple of times over the past hour, I've heard people talk about religion and that people are, by voting Republican, or making a statement. I'm from a Judeo-Christian and Scientology family, and I've heard recommendations from the pulpit. I've heard reports about, news reports saying that that's been happening. And of the three, only my Scientology church is very nonpartisan. We just recommend good citizenship. What factor do you think that has really played in this election?
On the broader question of religion, I don't know, to be perfectly honest. I think the one thing that people thought going into this election was that the sort of the bloc power of what's commonly referred to as the Christian right, the Christian coalition, and these groups had eroded in part because of organizational problems at the top there. It was much harder for people of a similar outlook and interest in those groups to sort of get organized. But activism in churches is very common. I mean, there's it is routine for candidates to work churches, particularly in the weekends leading up to an election.
The current Senate total as of this morning for the 108th Congress is Republicans 51, Democrats 46, one independent, two to be determined, one being the Landry race in the runoff, and the other being South Dakota, which you just alluded to. Do you know anything we don't know?
The last numbers that I heard, I believe, had the two about 1,500 votes apart, with John Thune, ahead by a hair. But again, I saw Tom Daschle saying, holding out some hope, saying the precincts that had not been counted yet were ones that had been strong for Tim Johnson in the past. Still, it seemed like a lot of ground to make up with not much to go. So.
Can you explain to us what's going to be happening in Alaska now? That the senator from there has now won the governorship?
It is a little bit complicated. There is a certification process, and there are a series of deadlines that mean Frank Murkowski will not leave immediately or cannot be replaced immediately. I know he's eager to go and become governor. He will essentially appoint his own successor. It will be a Republican, but I don't believe they can actually take office until early December, I believe is the way it works out. So
he'll still be here during the lame duck session?
That is my impression at this point. But we're going to be a lot of discussions with lawyers about Minnesota and Missouri and Alaska over the coming weeks.
Next call, Warren, Ohio, Democrat. Good morning.
Hi. My name is Gloria McKinney, and I'm a staunch Democrat. And I have very low opinion of what the president's been doing as far as running this country so far. But I feel that the people in this country will find out for themselves how badly he has been running this office. His staunch Republican followers, they are going to be the ones to really see how far he's going to do as far as carrying this country down straight to hell. But I like to also say that if the liberals, Democrats don't wake up and start getting some backbone about trying to handle the Democrat Party, they're not going to ever get back any power at all either.
Tim Curran, do you think that'll happen?
I think I alluded to this before. There obviously is a lot of sentiment out there among people who are identifying themselves as liberal Democrats that Bush needs to be engaged more directly. I think one reason to think that's going to happen is it just is a byproduct of a presidential election. I mean, Bush can look as intimidating as possible, but he's still going to face a challenge, and there will still be a spirited contest for the Democratic nomination, and people will take the case to him at that point.
Republican is next, Chantilly, Pennsylvania.
Good morning, Connie. Good morning, Tim. How are you?
Fine.
I'm a very happy Republican from the Old Dominion here this morning, but I did have a pointed comment that I was hoping you could further comment on, Tim, and it has to do with the Senate race in Georgia. Because it just seems to me that a canard has developed over the last few weeks that the Georgia folks didn't buy into. I have absolute respect for the senator who lost 3 limbs defending the country in Vietnam, and factually, the country is filled with millions of us who grew up in the 70s and 60s and spent our misbegotten youth cheering on the Viet Cong and grew up to figure out that we were on the wrong side of events and history then, and don't feel like we have to take a pass now on world affairs or military positions, that the country should take. But the fact that he did lose those 3 limbs, as honorable as that is, I just don't see where it gets a free pass on votes if those votes are relevant. If Max Cleland had voted closer to the junior senator of Georgia, he'd still be the senator. And I think, in essence, that's really what it came down to. The Chambliss never, and thanks to C-SPAN, I saw the ads. He never impinged on the patriotism or loyalty of Max Cleland. He was questioning his judgment on votes that had to do with national defense. Now, maybe that gets a little dicey when you're talking about a veteran and a triple amputee, but we got to be careful of this cheap emotionality. In a stretch way, it's kind of related to let's make Paul Wellstone's Senate seat a memorial for the next 6 years.
Thank you.
Again, I think that's a great point. I think that there was a sense that Max Cleland was untouchable on a lot of these issues, national defense and things like that, because he is a living symbol of what he went through and what the country went through. And I think, again, to the Wellstone point, there was a rejection of that kind of sentimentality in Minnesota. I mean, I think you'll find that most of the discussion about Coleman's apparent victory over Fritz Mondale will be reaction to the memorial service, which became a political rally. So I think, right there you're seeing 2 rejections of exactly the kind of sentimentality you're talking about.
Cape May, North Carolina.
Yes. I'm full-blooded Democrat, and I feel like I've been run over by a steamroller, to be honest with you. But what is going to happen to this nation with the Democrats, with the Republicans in control?
Caller, you are from North Carolina, right? Not New
That's
Jersey.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to double check I had the right state there. This is the first time that your Senate race has come up in our program this morning. What do you think of Elizabeth Dole being your next senator?
I think it's terrible. I wanted Bowles. I vote straight Democrat ticket. I don't vote for no Republicans under any circumstance, and I just feel like I've been hit by a steamroller, and I feel like our nation is on its way down.
Tim Curran.
I think just briefly to touch on the North Carolina Senate race, Republicans were very worried about this race. There was very little they could do to sort of influence Elizabeth Dole's candidacy, how she ran her race. She was going to be a very scripted, very controlled candidate. Was not going to engage in a lot of back and forth. Would be well funded, but they were worried about missteps. And I think when they saw the numbers coming in from North Carolina, that's one of the signs that they were going to have a very good night. To the broader issue of what Republicans are going to do, I think we discussed that Homeland Security is probably the top priority for Republicans here, and I think you're going to see a fairly aggressive agenda come out of here. We're still in a situation where both chambers are narrowly divided, but I think you're going to see an aggressive move for more tax relief, and that's probably going to be the sort of the hallmark of the Republican agenda over the next couple of months.
Give you an idea of some of the House members that you will no longer see on C-SPAN. They will not be coming back to the United States House of Representatives. They include Karen Thurman, a Democrat of Florida, Connie Morella, Republican of Maryland, Ronnie Shows, a Democrat of Mississippi, Jim Maloney, Democrat of Connecticut, David Phelps, a Democrat of Illinois, George Gekas, a Republican of Pennsylvania, and William Luther, a Democrat of Minnesota. Any of those that you want to comment on?
None really too shocking. A lot of those members lost in races against other incumbent members forced by redistricting. It's actually a fairly high number of incumbents to be defeated by recent standards. I know it doesn't seem like it, but to lose, 9 overall, possibly.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I only have 7 right here.
Well,
but
I think
maybe
there
I'm
were a
missing
couple still outstanding. That represents a fairly significant defeat for incumbents by recent standards. But
and I understand that we have sisters coming to the House of Representatives.
We're pretty sure it's a first. Loretta Sanchez has been a seated member for a while. She beat Congressman Bob Dornan a few years ago. And will be joined next year by Linda Sanchez, her sister. So we believe...
In the district right next to it?
I believe they are contiguous, yeah.
Next call is Glendale, California.
Yes, I think that this was an excellent election because I think that when you go back to the way the Senate was done in the 1920s before they amended the Constitution, it was mainly elected by, I think, the state legislature or the governors of the state. Georgia was a good example of why you should really think about touching something, and this is what happens. And also, with the presidency, the second person used to become the vice president. That was changed to put the same people, to put the president and the vice president on the same ticket. I think that this is why this country is losing the check and balance system. Thank you.
I lost the thread a little bit there.
Yeah, the check and balance, that's why the country has lost the check and balance system, but I lost that thread too.
Well, I think one of the interesting points about that is that, Republicans, as disappointed as Democrats are today, everything rests on Republicans. 2 years from now, George Bush could see this victory that he had a lot to do with, frankly, as a kind of curse if the economy is still in trouble and the American public is not satisfied with the course government's taken in the 108th Congress.
Norwich, Connecticut, Republican, good morning.
Good morning. I think yesterday was a true victory for morality. The majority of Americans want to see their children protected from all of the immoralities in the media, and such as violence and sex and drugs. And I think that we'll see the abortion issue come up and be quite prominent. The Republicans, congratulations, will now be able to appoint our conservative judges. And everybody knows that true Catholics should be Republican. And I'm glad to see that Kennedy lost, because the Kennedys are hypocrites as far as the Catholic morals are concerned. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Walk us through what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks.
The next couple of weeks, we'll see the first order of business in the Senate, at least, will be ironing out some of these details about when Mr. Talent shows up, when Mr. Coleman shows up, the role of the appointed senator from Minnesota, the Murkowski appointment. Next week, we will have leadership elections in the Senate. I think they're pretty clear. Senator Lott had effectively retained that post before the elections. I think the Republican wins in the Senate only sort of enhance his position. On the House side, among Republicans, we also have a fairly, Denny Hastert will remain Speaker. Tom DeLay is going to move up to Majority Leader. Roy Blunt is going to move up to Whip. And I think we'll be watching for Mr. Gephardt's decision is probably going to be the biggest.
And when might we know that?
There had been rumors that he might make some kind of announcement or statement as early as tomorrow. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. I think there's going to be a lot of sorting through the results of the elections probably before he makes any definitive statement.
And do you foresee any change in the mood on the Senate floor during this possible lame duck session?
I wouldn't be surprised if Democrats sort of accepted what happened and took a little bit of a step back, depending on how Republicans approach a lame duck. If they approach it very aggressively, then you see individuals like Senator Byrd in particular sort of step forward and put the brakes on things. But I think Democrats sort of listened or certainly heard what the American public was saying, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were a little bit cowed by that.
Tim Curran, a roll call. Thanks very much for coming over.
Thank you,
Busy day for everyone. Appreciate it. Well, we're going to go back to phone calls now in the next half hour and also reiterate for you just what some of the numbers are in the United States Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives now. Here is the numbers for the United States Senate as we know them this morning. Republicans take control of the Senate, 51 for the 108th Congress, 51 Republicans, 46 Democrats, and 1 independent. There are 2 races yet to be determined. One of the races will be the runoff election in Louisiana with Congressman Mary Landrieu, that she needed to get 50% of the vote in order to win there. She did not get 50% of the vote, and therefore there will be a runoff on December 7th there. The other race that Tim Curran talked about a little bit earlier, which is the South Dakota Senate race, and that Senate race has yet to be determined. We're still waiting for some more information on that. It might be a little while this morning, but it was this morning around, I'd say around 3 hours ago, that they did announce the Minnesota Senate race, that Norm Coleman had won over the former Vice President Walter Mondale in that. So that's what's going on in the Senate. In the House, here's what it looks like. For the 108th Congress, the Republicans go from 223 in the current Congress to 227, a pickup of 4 there. Democrats go from 208 to 203, and there is 1 independent. We're still waiting on 4 different races that will be determined there. Also, to give you a little bit of an update on what's going on in terms of what happens in the United States Senate now that it's gone Republican, because of course for the 108th Congress there will be new chairman of the committees. The Associated Press a little bit earlier in the week had done a listing of all of the members of Congress who currently serve in the United States Senate as the chairman, and who might become the chairman if if Republicans were to take back over. For instance, in the Appropriations Committee, Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia has been the chairman under the Democrats. Ted Stevens of Alaska is expected to be the new chairman. For the Budget Committee, Kent Conrad of North Dakota had been the chairman of the Budget Committee. Now, Pete Domenici had been the chairman of the Budget Committee before, and his name comes next in this. However, according to Tim Curran this morning, Mr. Domenici is more interested in possibly taking over the Energy Committee at this time for the 108th Congress. Armed Services, John Warner of Virginia taking over from Carl Levin. For Foreign Relations, Mr. Curran felt that Richard Lugar will take over Foreign Relations from Joe Biden. You will probably see John McCain back as the chairman of the Commerce Committee instead of Ernest Hollings. And a couple other ones, Judiciary, Orrin Hatch back over in the Judiciary Committee instead of Patrick Leahy. Probably Judd Gregg of New Hampshire will be taking over the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee from Senator Edward Kennedy. In the Ethics Committee, Pat Roberts will probably take over from Harry Reid. Intelligence Committee, a little unclear yet, because Senator Shelby has two committees that he is the ranking on. He's ranking on intelligence. He's also ranking on banking. So it's unclear as to which one, at least from what we know now, that he might take over. Rules Committee, Mitch McConnell taking over, who won re-election yesterday, taking over from Chris Dodd of Connecticut. Chris Bond of Missouri taking over the Small Business Committee from John Kerry, and Arlen Specter taking over the Veterans Affairs Committee from Jay Rockefeller. Now, these aren't determined in stone in any way, but what we were just looking at this morning is who the current chairmen are and who the ranking members are from those committees who might be going back, but there could be some juggling there depending upon what happens. And of course, the House did not change hands. It stayed Republican, and none of the current sitting committee chairmen lost or went on to other jobs. So we're guessing then that there won't be many changes in the chairmanship on the House side for the 108th Congress. We are now going to take a phone call from Steve Kraske. Steve Kraske is with the Kansas City Star joining us this morning. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Connie.
Well, we have both the Kansas and Missouri side, but the Missouri side is what really had people's attention, the win of Jim Talent over Gene Carnahan. What do you think happened at the end?
Well, any number of things. These Monday morning quarterbacking things, you can always point to so many different factors, but certainly it strikes me that Jim Talent's message was very effective. He ran a campaign based on the two-word slogan, experience matters. And it seems to me that was a very effective thing because it cut both ways. It said something very positive about Jim Talent and his prior experience in the U.S. House, and also said something sort of questioning about Gene Carnahan, questioning the amount of experience she had. So I thought his message was very good. And certainly I think President Bush's 5 visits to Missouri on his behalf was just a very important factor here. It really did energize the outstate vote, people who tend to vote Republican anyway, but certainly I'm guessing got them out in much bigger numbers than might have otherwise occurred. So I think thirdly, Jim Talent's a very attractive candidate. He's a very casual campaigner, relates very well to people, and I think he was just ran a very smart race.
Does this mean that the Missouri electorate did not had passed on from the death of Mrs. Carnahan's husband?
I think no question about that, Connie. There certainly was a sense in this race that Gene Carnahan had transformed from something of a sympathetic figure to just another politician. She was criticized in a way that really sort of said that she was just a politician. And I think Talent was taking something of a risk there early on by really addressing her as a politician. He called her Mrs. Carnahan, not Senator Carnahan. And I think that was risky at first, but I think he pulled it off. And she really did end this race being viewed as someone who was an incumbent as opposed to a sympathetic widow.
If this is the front page of the Kansas City Star this morning, and Steve Kraske, who's on the phone with us, has this lead story on the Kansas side of the new governor of Kansas, Kathleen Sebelius. What happened there, and how big did she win?
Well, an amazing development from a distant vantage point here. I mean, Democrats don't win statewide races for governor in a GOP-dominant state like Kansas. It hasn't happened for like 65 years. But Kathleen Sebelius pulled it off last night, and she really did it in kind of decisive fashion. The race was never considered to be that close. I think she had a huge advantage. She didn't have any opposition in the primary. Schallenberger, the Republican, had to go through a three-candidate primary and emerge from that. He came out of that primary without any money and had to start from scratch in a very real sense. Sebelius had a huge war chest on hand, and she really was able to get her positive message up on TV very early, weeks before Schallenberger was able to do that. And she really just seemed to cruise to victory, never seemed to break a sweat, a very unusual development in a state that is just so dominated by Republican interests.
Is there a dynasty there? Your paper has her picture with her father, who was the former governor of Ohio, and then would she be the daughter-in-law of the former congressman from Kansas?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if dynasty is the right word because it's a dynasty split among a couple of states here,
right.
But that's correct. I mean, she is the daughter of former Ohio Governor John Gilligan, who led that state in the early 70s, and she's the daughter-in-law of former Kansas Congressman Keith Sebelius, who represented the western part of the state. I think that really helped Kathleen Sebelius. People remember that name out in western Kansas, where people tend to vote in very heavy numbers. I think that name recognition was just a huge advantage for her and very difficult for Tim Schallenberger to overcome.
Okay, back to Missouri, because we were out there, and it was interesting to see some of the votes, the referendum that you had up there, and one I was interested in knowing about was the cigarette tax.
Yeah,
what happened?
I think that what was the final result of that thing? Did it go down or pass?
It passed. It says it narrowly defeated, according to the Associated Press, but it would have quadrupled the tax on cigarettes?
Yeah, exactly. I think that was seen as somewhat controversial. Just any kind of tax increase gets people in Missouri a little bit uncomfortable. And early on in the evening, that proposition was failing, but apparently it rallied later on. And Missourians aren't known for approving tax increases of any substantial size at any time. So an interesting development there, too.
Okay, Steve Kraske of the Kansas City Star joining us this morning. Thanks very much.
Glad to do it, Connie.
Okay, well, it's going to take some phone calls and also give you a little bit more information about some Senate races and some of the new senators coming up. Next is Fairbanks, Alaska. Good morning, Fairbanks.
Good morning. Actually, I had a question for Mr. Curran.
I'm sorry he's already left.
I know.
Maybe you could give us your thoughts on the election.
Well, I'm a Democrat, so it's something I'm going to have to think through. I don't want to come back like some people have this morning, which are very vicious, and say we got what they deserve and things like that. I was very disappointed in that. But if I could ask a question to you, maybe you could ask it to some later guest.
Okay, sure.
Okay, up until this point, other countries have made a clear delineation between the American people and the American administration. And my question was, will the other countries think that this election mandate in support of Bush? And if so, whoever I was going to ask, the Curran, do they think that there will be repercussions in this way?
Do you think so?
I think so, because war is, we obviously are going to war sooner.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Fairfield, Connecticut, you're next. Good morning.
Is that Fairfield?
That's it. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. I think what everybody's forgetting, and I haven't heard it talked about, I think the earlier caller had it right, integrity. A lot of these guys who went down in defeat, instead of investigating the Clintons during the impeachment, became lawyers for them. And I think that hurt the Democrats a lot. They've lost their moral compass, and I think they're paying the price. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's run through the list of the new senators who will be in the 108th Congress. First of all, from Arkansas, you have Mark Pryor, Republican, son of former Senator Pryor and the current Attorney General of that state. Saxby Chambliss in Georgia. Jim Talent of Missouri. John Sununu, a Republican of New Hampshire. Frank Lautenberg, New Jersey, Elizabeth Dole, North Carolina, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Lamar Alexander of Tennessee, and John Cornyn, a Republican of Texas. Those are all of the new senators coming in the 108th Congress. Now let's give I'd like to give you an idea of the new governors who are going to be it. It's quite a long list, but we thought you might like to see it today. Roy Blagojevich, a Democrat of Illinois, Craig Benson of New Hampshire, Ed Rendell of Pennsylvania, Mitt Romney of Massachusetts, Mark Sanford of South Carolina, Mike Rounds of South Dakota, Kathleen Sebelius of Kansas, John Baldacci of Maine, Jennifer Granholm of Michigan, Bill Richardson of New Mexico, John Carcieri of Rhode Island, Phil Bredesen of Tennessee, Brad Henry, Oklahoma, Jim Doyle, Wisconsin, Sonny Perdue of Georgia, Frank Murkowski of Alaska, Tim Pawlenty of Minnesota, Dave Freudenthal of Wyoming, and Linda Lingle of Hawaii. All those are new governors in this country. Next call, Arlington, Texas, Independent. Good morning, Arlington. Go ahead.
Good morning, Connie, and thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I have a couple of comments. First of all, I'm glad to see the race over. I obviously am from Texas, and it's been a very contentious race, or races, I should say. I'm awful tired of hearing all the negative attack ads, and it's kind of a relief to have a C-SPAN to go to where there are no such political banner going on. I'm pleased with the outcome of the current election because now there's somebody to drive the bus and hold totally responsible and totally accountable for the agenda that they put forth, congressionally and executively.
Do you think there hasn't been that accountability in the past?
Well, I don't, because of the obstructionism that's been taking place in the Senate. It's so politicized that there's nobody really driving the bus. There's someone trying to drive the bus, but someone in the back seats keeps interfering with the operation of the bus.
So who are you going to hold responsible?
Well, the Bush administration and the Republican Party is now in the driver's seat, and it's time to step up and hit it out of the park or sit down and shut up. My biggest concern is the Democrats don't really have a place to go now. And I'm almost concerned Bill Clinton cannot run for another term as president, but there's nothing to stop him from running for vice president. Nothing worse with the Democrats having no place to go than my thoughts of a Clinton ticket in the future, with Mrs. Clinton for president and Bill Clinton for vice president. They don't really have much of a place to go, and there's no one on the horizon that has the clout and the political power of that duo, and I'd hate to see that happen.
Okay, thank you for the call. New information coming in about some of the races we've been talking about. The one in South Dakota is really, really tight, according to some of the most recent numbers from the Associated Press, with Senator Tim Johnson, the Democrat, at 167,252 votes, and Representative John Thune, the Republican, at 166,727 votes. There's another precinct still out there. There's less than 500 votes between the two of them, 727 minus 252. It is really, really close. So there's about just less than 500 votes between the two of them. We probably won't know anything till later on today. We do hope, however, that at some point in time today we're going to hear more from the Minnesota Senate race from former Vice President Walter Mondale and Norm Coleman. Norm Coleman being named the winner there. San Diego, you're next. Democrat, good morning. Good morning, San Diego.
I'm here. I'm going to put it on mute.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I tell you how I look at this.
Okay.
It's a disgrace that the Democratic Party, and I'm a Democrat, didn't take a bigger interest in this campaign. They made the Speaker, the senior member of the Senate, the coordinator representing the Democratic Party. Look at the barrage that the Republicans had. The President of the United States traveled continually. His mother and father traveled separately and continually. The Vice President traveled continually. McCain traveled continually. We didn't have that with the Democratic Party, where there was more adverse publicity, more adverse negative about the Democratic Party. I was so disappointed. Here was a guy. He's the senior member for the Democrats in the Senate. They turned the whole thing over to him. Now, he's had a bad name long before he ever got to this election. Everything, every newspaper report, every talk show talked about Daschle as an obstructionist. Now, here he comes to the time to go and represent his party, and he's going all over the country. He's considered an obstructionist. People, when I talk to people here in San Diego, they immediately say, well, you Democrats always want to stop things. I talked to 25 people yesterday, and I was the only one that voted. I went up to this clerk. I got my car fixed. I said, did you guys vote? No, we don't have time. So this is a disgrace. I'm really disappointed.
Thank you for the call this morning. We're going to go out and try to get some more information about that South Dakota Senate race. David Krantz is on the phone with us. He's with the Argus Leader in South Dakota. Good morning, Mr. Krantz.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Can we understand that there might be less than 500 votes difference?
Yeah, we're down to about 200 right now with 2 precincts left to go. We still have one in Shannon County in the Native American Reservation and another in Hamlin County. And it's kind of anticipated that with the voters there, it'll probably be a wash in terms of support for Johnson on the Shannon County count, and also support for Thune on the Hamlin County count. So it looks like Johnson will probably win by 200 votes or so right now.
What's the impact of that on South Dakota politics?
It's huge, of course, because it's not that race that's probably the most significant, but it's what happened overall last night in terms of losing the majority leadership. South Dakotans have, in a lot of cases, taken a great pride in having Senator Daschle in that position, and he certainly had some detractors in it too. I didn't mean to imply that it's a unanimous feeling, but that will have a lot of impact. That with Johnson's situation, there's still a long road in this. I'm sure there will be a recount. There's always a possible contesting of the race, too. So it seems like he's going to end up the winner today, but still facing a lot of challenges before he actually is certified.
Do you think this will buoy Mr. Daschle's in his decision on whether to stay around?
I talked to him a few minutes ago, and he told me that he feels that he will seek the leadership position again, even though it's the minority leadership thing, saying it's more important than usual. He won't elaborate on the 3 options that he's talked about in terms of his future, which, of course, are retirement from the Senate, running for re-election, or running for president. He said right now that's just the furthest thing from his mind. And so people are kind of watching that with some curiosity out here. We expect him to make a decision sometime shortly after the first of the year on, which of those options he's going to pursue.
Did he give you any reaction or explanation for what happened in the Senate last night?
He said he couldn't see it coming. He said he talked to all the candidates yesterday. They all felt good, the ones that obviously were in contention here, including Mrs. Carnahan, of course, and Senator Cleland, and the others who fell victim, so to speak, and Walter Mondale. They all felt good about where they were, and he says I never saw it coming, and it was a surprise to him. He said it just seemed to have turned on Bush's popularity and doing things right in terms of his barnstorming around the country and raising the issues of the Iraqi situation and also the Homeland Security issue, which he really used a lot out here in Sioux Falls and Aberdeen in the last week when he visited here.
Did he say anything about what his party did wrong?
No, he doesn't believe they did anything wrong. He believes that they had the message, and he argues that there's been a lot of criticism in the media about him not, or the Democrats in general, not exploiting the economy issue. He says we did do that. He said we had loud voices on this, but the president, in his trip and his approach to campaigning, was louder and creating a lot of emotion, a lot of positive emotion that benefited the Republican candidates. He doesn't apologize at all for the slate that they fielded in this race, saying that they had good candidates in the race, but it just was one of those things that wasn't meant to be.
You can go to the website and read David Kranz's piece, as we did this morning. He's with the Argus Leader. Mr. Kranz, can you give us a feel for when we might know the final decision, and has there been any determination on when the candidates might speak?
It could be a long time. I talked to Dassel about this morning because the last major recount we had in South Dakota was 1978 when he ran as a freshman candidate for Congress in 1978, and it took him a year and a half before he was actually certified in the U.S. House of Representatives. But in this case, we start, on the 25th of November with a basic potential for a recount. The votes first have to be canvassed, then the recount, and then after the recount, there's always potential for a challenge to the election. We've had some voting irregularities here, and it all depending on who wins, you always face that possibility. So it could be a long time, quite frankly.
David Krantz, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The Senate tally right now, in the current Congress, Republicans have 49. In the 108th Congress right now, they have 50. They would have 51. Democrats, 49 in the current Congress. They would have 46 in the 108th Congress. 2 independents currently, 1 independent for the 108th Congress. 2 seats still out there. One is the Landrieu seat in Louisiana, where there will be a runoff, and the other is this South Dakota seat that we just talked about, and it looks like there might be a recount there. Next is Austin, Texas, Republican. Good morning. Good morning, Austin.
Basically, I wanted to let you know that I am a pro-life, I'm Hispanic, I'm Catholic, and I'm a Republican from Texas, and I am so proud of the outcome of the elections. I can't say enough. This is all about integrity. It's all about morality. The rhetoric of the Democrats had you believe that the economy was bad. They had you make you think that we were against the war. And really, this is just about integrity. It's about morality. And I think the Republican Party has taken a big positive step in the right direction.
Dover, Delaware's next. Good morning, Dover.
I just wanted to say that I think Bush has been using Iraq to cover up what he's been doing here at home, and so that nobody was paying attention to the decisions that they've made here at home. And now I think that he'll let go of the urgency to go to war and follow what the UN says, because now that they've gotten their victory. And I think the Democrats need to wake up and get out there and vote and start speaking up a lot more.
Thank you. That a resolution on Iraq, or a new resolution on Iraq, scheduled to go to the United Nations today. Next call is Douglasville, Georgia. Good morning, Douglasville, Republican.
Good morning. Mary Ann Jordan here in Douglasville, Georgia. I couldn't be more excited about the outcome of the race. I can tell you that in early 2000, I was so excited about George W. Bush. I've never been more excited about a person, a candidate, a president. He leads. He works. He's wonderful.
Can I ask you, a lot of the callers this morning have talked about some of the reasons for why Mr. Chambliss won over Senator Cleland yesterday in your state. One of them was about the flag issue, and the other one was generally about race. Do you agree or disagree that those 2 issues had anything to do?
I do not believe they had anything. Possibly the flag could have been somewhat of an issue, but I believe the values that Saxby Chambliss, we are just thrilled here. Georgia, we believe in family values. You've heard it over and over, and I think that George W. Bush is leading this country in the right direction, and I, for one, have never been happier in my life with the direction that a country is going in.
Thank you. Let's take a call from Coventry, Connecticut, Democrat. Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning.
You're on the air, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to congratulate Republican the way they handle everything this year, and I hope the Republican government will be able to do the job it's supposed to do against terror and against Sudan. It really scared me about everything happened in Missouri, the death to the senator, too close to every time election, and one in Minnesota. It think scare me the way how people take care of business behind the umbrella and nobody see it, and it can I don't know, it can scare a lot of people who see that
Okay.
And I hope that Republican, do the great thing for the country, and I'm happy with everything.
Thank you. Eureka, Kansas. Good morning, Eureka.
Good morning. Just to enlighten the people back here in Kansas, we voted Kathleen Sebelius as a governor. And the reason that happened in a Republican state was the fact of her ethics. She ruled against an insurance company wanting to merge with another insurance company in another state.
Was she the insurance commissioner or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was insurance commissioner, and that's what got her in office. It was her ethics, period.
Okay, thank you for the call this morning. There are quite a few ballot initiatives across the country. We don't have a lot of the results, but we do have some from the Associated Press this morning. There was one in Oregon on a ballot measure to establish a universal health care system for residents. That went down to defeat 79% to 21%. That would have been the first state to have a state universal health care system. Also, there was a ballot measure in Nevada that would ban marriage between people of the same sex. That was voted for. That did pass 67% to 33%. There was a ballot measure in Florida that would ban smoking in all workplaces. That passed 71% to 29%. There were also several ballot measures decriminalizing the possession of small amounts of marijuana in Arizona. They said no to that, 43% to 57%, and Nevada said no to it also, 39% to 61%. Those are just a few of the ballot measures. We'll be hearing a lot about them coming up in the next couple days, I'm sure. Well, we're going to continue our look at what the House and Senate is going to be looking like and what the issues are going to be for the 108th Congress in just a moment.
Terry McAuliffe, chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and Mark Roscoe, chairman of the Republican National Committee, will talk about the 2002 election results today at the National Press Club in Washington. Live coverage begins at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, here on C-SPAN.
Wonderful. For America's classrooms, from C-SPAN and your cable company, a timeline of America's presidents. On one giant poster, all 42 presidents, at each step of their public lives.
So then he served his
Follow their careers.
At the same time he was...
Bring history to life.
Yeah.
Middle school and high school teachers, go to cspan.org/classroom to get a free timeline for your classroom. From C-SPAN and your local cable company.
I'm fascinated by...
This Sunday, Frank Williams discusses his latest, Judging Lincoln. 9 essays that include Lincoln's attitude toward women, civil liberties, the 13th Amendment, as well as collecting Lincoln memorabilia. Judging Lincoln this Sunday at 8 Eastern and Pacific. And in the weeks ahead, on November 17th, Rick Atkinson looks at An Army at Dawn, the War in North Africa, 1942 to 1943. And on November 24th, Peter Crass's biography of businessman and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie. All in the weeks ahead, on C-SPAN's Book Notes.
The New York Times bestseller, Book Notes, Stories from American History, is now available in paperback. Collected from C-SPAN's Sunday evening interview program, more than 80 contemporary writers and historians examine the moments that made American history. With 3 new chapters offering perspectives on September 11th and the 2000 presidential elections. Book Notes, Stories from American History, now available in paperback for everyone interested in American history.
C-SPAN Radio is heard in the Washington-Baltimore region at 90.1 FM and is nationwide on Sirius Satellite Radio and XM Satellite Radio. C-SPAN Radio is politics, history, books, and Washington events 24 hours a day. Unique public affairs programming on the radio since 1997. Find out more at cspanradio.org.
Go online today and sign up for C-SPAN Alert. C-SPAN Alert is the best way to get Book TV schedule highlights sent directly to you by email. With C-SPAN Alert, you'll get the latest on Book TV's coverage of nonfiction and best-selling authors, as well as up-to-date schedule information on Book TV's signature series, In Depth. C-SPAN Alert, delivered directly to you. Sign up today at cspan.org. Washington Journal continues.
Two reporters from Congressional Quarterly are with us this morning. We're going to continue our look at the election. Greg Giroux is a political reporter for CQ. Any update? Well, we've been talking about the race in South Dakota. Mm-hmm. The most recent news that we have is that there will be a recount there.
Mm-hmm. Actually, let me ask my colleague Mary Claire Jelonic, who covers the Senate races for us, if she has some sort of information on that. Yeah.
Right. I don't think we know yet if there's going to be a recount. It looks like it's still a precinct coming in that it might be on an Indian reservation that could possibly favor Johnson in that race. So we'll have to see what happens. It's very possible there'll be a recount, and they say that could take as long as a month. So could be a while before we see an end to that race.
I'm interested in talking again about a little bit about this new makeup of the Senate and what it's going to mean for committee chairmanships, because people want to know how that's going to impact. Have you been able to do any look at that, and what are the major committees and who might be the new chairman?
There isn't a lot of change in the Senate. I think that Murkowski is chairman of Energy, and he has been elected to the governorship of Alaska. So he will be, since the Republicans will control the Senate, he would have been the chair. Mm-hmm. And looks like Domenici will now be the chair of the Energy Committee.
Of the Energy Committee.
Yes. But
after Murkowski, I think it was Nichols, now Senator Nichols of Oklahoma, with him being a member of the leadership, can he also have a committee?
I'm not actually sure about that, but it looks like he'll be chairman of Budget, I believe.
A Budget Committee.
Right, yes. So, and with Daschle, it looks like he will probably regain his, not regain, he will keep his position as leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate. There isn't anyone who looks like they would challenge Daschle for that, so.
Greg Giroux, now over to the House. Sure. Were there member-to-member races is something that we haven't had a chance to really take a look at this morning. Can you help us out with some of those?
Sure, there were 4 such races, and those were matchups induced by redistricting in many cases because states lost seats in the reapportionment process in 2000. And therefore, the plans that were drawn pitted a Democrat against a Republican incumbent. Republicans went 3 for 4 in those races, as I think a lot of people might have expected. The victories for the Republicans were in Mississippi, Connecticut, and Illinois. In Mississippi, the 3rd district; in Connecticut, the 5th district; and in Illinois, the 19th district. Republicans all won those races very handily. The lone Democratic victory in those 4 member versus member races was in Pennsylvania's 17th district, where Democratic Congressman Tim Holden narrowly beat veteran Republican incumbent George Gekas. So Republicans went 3 out of 4 on the night.
Since we've spent so much time with the Senate races this morning, maybe there were some House races that were surprises that you could help us with.
Yeah, there were a few of them. Overall, I think there weren't a whole lot of shocking upsets, but I think a few stand out. I looked at the results in Georgia, which was just a terrible state for the Democrats on election night, from governor and senator on down. But even in the House races, I think the Republicans pulled some surprises. The Georgia Democrats controlled the redistricting process, and Georgia gained 2 seats. And the Georgia Democrats wanted to change the delegation from 8 to 3 Republican to 7 to 6 Democratic. And that was really a key piece for the Democrats in their quest to win back the House. But there were 4 open seats, and all 4 of them were the Democrats drew to elect candidates of their party, but they lost 2 of them. I think all 4 of them, a few months ago, I would have said all 4 of them probably would have been slam dunks for the Democrats, but they lost 2 of them. Georgia's 11th district, where Republican State Senator Phil Gingrey beat Democratic businessman Roger Kahn. And in the 12th district, where Republican college professor Max Burns trounced Democrat Charles Walker Jr. Those were 2 big surprises that stuck out at me.
Also, was Congressman Bonilla? Did he?
That is one of the 4 races I do not currently have a winner in. I think the vote counting in Texas, particularly
one of those very close ones. I think it's one of the 5 that we haven't named
yet.
I think something to note in that race, that the vote that they're still waiting to come in is in Bexar County, which is Bonilla's home base, and the vote that's always elected him every time. And that district is interesting because it's heavily Democratic in the western areas. That district is huge, and it's very rural in the western areas of the district, but a lot of the population base of the district is actually in San Antonio, and that's the vote that they're waiting for. So,
but if you were to lose, that would be a big deal,
right?
Yeah, that'd be a big
Yes,
surprise
it would
if
be a
Bonilla
huge
lost.
surprise.
We have a list of the defeated House members we wanted to show you this morning because we're talking about the House and Senate races specifically. The House members who will not be coming back to Washington for the 108th Congress, we have Karen Thurman of Florida, Connie Morella of Maryland, Ronnie Shows of Mississippi, James Maloney of Connecticut, David Phelps of Illinois, George Kikas of Pennsylvania, and William Luther of Minnesota.
Not a very long list there, and
No?
it's one would be hard-pressed to find any incumbent who lost. I mean, redistricting contributed to the law. You could say that of that list of 7 that you just went down, I think that you could say that all 7 of them lost in part or in small or large part because of redistricting plans. Connie Morella certainly got a more Democratic-leaning district. That certainly contributed to her defeat. And we had those that list of 7 you just ticked off had those 4 incumbents that we knew that at least 4 incumbents had to lose because of those redistricting matchups that pitted a Democrat against a Republican. And Karen Thurman lost as a result of redistricting. The Republicans in Florida really drew a map that really threaded the needle to give them the maximum gain in Florida. Everybody knows that Florida is a very close state politically, but it looks like the Florida Republicans won 18 out of 25 U.S. House seats in Florida. It's pretty amazing.
And on the Senate side, the defeated senators, Senator Max Cleland of Georgia, Senator Tim Hutchinson of Arkansas, Senator Jean Carnahan of Missouri.
Right, right. I think that Max Cleland and, in a lot of those states, you were just sort of seeing the tide of the state go with it. Tim Hutchinson had some particular problems that I think added to that race. But Max Cleland and Jean Carnahan, they were vulnerable. Those are 2 states that were favoring Republicans this year, and they suffered for it. The Jean Carnahan race, I thought, was a lot closer than a lot of people thought going into Election Day yesterday. I think a lot of people thought that it was possible that Talent would win by a larger margin, but that was very, very close, and she conceded when the race was within 1 point and still uncounted, but it turned out to go for Talent.
What's going to happen in Louisiana?
Well, that's a really interesting race. I guess some people might be breathing a sigh of relief that the entire city of Washington is not going to move down to Louisiana this month, since we already know who's going to be controlling the Senate, but Landrieu got 46%, I believe, under the 50% she needed, and Suzanne Hike Terrell got, I believe, 26%, or somewhere in the mid-20s in her getting in the runoff with Landrieu. That is not a huge showing for Landrieu, and looks like that race could be up for grabs in a month.
How will that happen?
How will
the runoff be done?
The runoff will just be the 2 of them on the ballot, and it'll be December 7th. So we have a month to see what happens in that race.
And is there unlimited money able to be spent between now and then, or are there some limits?
Yes, it's the same rules that were before the election, so nothing isn't going into effect for this race.
Let's get to some calls. Joplin, Missouri, Democrat. Good morning.
Good morning. I hope that the country is happy this morning. We now have the Bush crime family in total control of this country. Behind the scenes, Bush and his people were planning to completely demolish the military and the veteran, and they did it. The veterans were fighting so hard, and we're supposed to have all this support out there from Bush. Kit Vaughn, Jim Talent, oh, what liars. I can't begin to tell you how much I hate these people and how many calls came into our households here in this dinky little county in southwest Missouri. Barbara Bush and George Bush are responsible for this miserable crime family. Homeland Security, how dare this man question the patriotism of our people, our veterans, and our military. He demolished us, and he did it on purpose.
Thanks, Joplin. We gave you a chance. Thank you very much. When the day is done, what impact do you think people are going to say that President Bush had on the House and Senate races?
Well, I think looking at results from a cross-section of races throughout the country, I think Republican candidates definitely received greater vote percentages than I anticipated they would. I think there was a general boost nationwide in a lot of the House races as a result of President Bush's popularity, and certainly, the statistics that show that the party controlling the White House always seems to lose seats in a midterm election. It didn't happen this time. And a big reason for that was the president's sustained popularity.
If you haven't heard us talk a whole lot about governor's races, actually the Arizona governor's race this morning, it's because we don't know what the outcome is. Apparently, according to the Associated Press, it might take a couple days before the rest of the ballots are done. This is Democrat Janet Napolitano, according to the AP, holding a narrow lead over Republican Matt Salmon, in the Arizona governor's race. Perhaps hundreds of thousands of votes still to be counted in the process. They say that could take days. Right now, with the precincts reporting, Napolitano has a 47%, Salmon with 44%. Back to the phones. McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey, Republican. Good morning.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. Just a couple of comments about the Democratic Party. Being a moderate Republican, I think part of the problem with the Democrats is that when they pander to their special interest, minority women, the elderly, the TV ads, they scare the elderly thinking that the Republicans are going to take away, all the prescription drugs from them. Women, they think they're going to take their shoes off, put them back in the kitchen, and minorities, just put them back on plantations. That is not the case with the Republican Party. If the Democrats would be more honest and and let us know that they're going to raise taxes, that they're not going to do what they say they're going to do. Become more centrist. I think that the Democratic Party right now is too far to the left. I feel disenfranchised with the Democratic Party, even though I do believe in some of their points. They don't believe in my morality. They don't. They don't believe what I believe, and that's part of the problem, I think. Thank you.
He said the Democratic Party wasn't far enough to the left. Others have said that it was not far enough to the left.
Yeah, there's going to be. I think there's going to be a big debate in the Democratic Party about whether, about that. I mean, there is a debate within the party about should the party, adhere to more, populist or liberal tenets, or run more as centrists, run more like the Republicans. I think this. I was interested to hear the caller said he's a moderate Republican from New Jersey. I'm not sure in which part of the state he's from, but there was a.
It's at an Air Force base.
Yeah. Okay. So. Oh, there you go. But there was a big House race last night in New Jersey, or at least one that we thought would be in the 5th district for Congresswoman Marge Rockama's seat, and there I think. We were looking at what the moderate Republicans in that district might do in that race between Republican Scott Garrett, who's more conservative than Rockama, and Democrat Ann Summers, who really ran as a moderate Democrat. Tried to paint herself as more closely tied to moderate Republicans than Rockama. And it turned out Garrett won by 22 points, which was just an astronomical margin. So, moderate Republicans, I think, stuck with the Republican Party last night, certainly in New Jersey.
I think it's interesting what he says, too, about feeling disenfranchised, because in Senate races, Democrats really did run a lot of very moderate candidates, candidates who were trying to look very Republican throughout the entire race, and in fact would have voted very moderately in the Senate. So it's a lot on the line for the Democrats. They lost some of those races, and they tried very hard to run to the center. So I think that there's going to be a lot of thinking about the direction the Democratic Party will take now.
Corpus Christi, Texas.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, your two guests that's right there, listen to my name. This is my 4th time calling here. Y'all are not taking me serious. The Texas project is starting up. I was waiting till the second half of the elections, and I'm going to do everything I can to destroy the presidency of Bush. I'm sick of the Bushes. I've had enough of them. I did not vote for Perry. He was here. Bush was here to support Perry. I hate the Bushes, and I'm going to do everything I can to destroy his presidency.
Thank you. Mary Claire, you're from Texas?
I am a Texas native, and I would say that obviously the voters did not agree with the caller. Perry won very decisively, as did John Cornyn. The Republicans won all 4 of their major races at the top of the ballot, and that was a lot on the line also for the Texas Democrats. I mean, they really sort of put all their eggs in one basket this year and said, we're going to win these races, we're coming back. Texas isn't, not a Republican state, it's a Bush state. And I think what we're still seeing the Bush effect in Texas. But I think that Texas, a lot was said last night in the elections. I mean, Republicans won very decisively. So looks like it's going to be a while for Democrats to rebound from that.
There are about 5 races in the House that have not been called yet, some of which we talked about earlier. 226 to 203, it looks like the numbers for the 108th Congress with 1 independent. Obviously, there was no change in the leadership, and therefore, can we expect, is there any discussion that needs to be had in terms of committee leadership or power leadership?
Not a whole lot. I don't think you'll see a whole lot of change on the Republican side. I mean, the number 2 spot, Dick Armey, is retiring, and I think you'll see Congressman Tom DeLay move into that spot, the majority leader spot, and I think you'll see Congressman Roy Blunt of Missouri move up into the whip spot that DeLay has. I think the real question is what happens on the Democratic side. They have to, lick some of their wounds. They didn't succeed as they had hoped last night, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the leadership spots on their party.
Who won the Army seat, the Dick Armey seat? Do you know?
That was won by Michael Burgess, a physician who defeated Dick Armey's son in the Republican primary. It seems like ages ago, but that was in March.
Right. Next call, Silver Spring, Maryland. Good morning.
Good morning. You need to add Bob Ehrlich to the list of new governors. You've repeatedly given the list of governors, and you've constantly left him off the list.
Wow.
So please add Bob Ehrlich to the governor of Maryland.
Well, we've been talking about it all morning, and if it was not on the list, my apologies.
Okay. This is payback for the 8 years that I suffered through the Clinton-Gore administration. I got sick and tired of character didn't matter. Oh, so what if it was a private thing? He's doing his job. People just got fed up with that. And then when Bill and Hillary come back out on the stage and campaign for the same Democrats who pretend to help people and really don't. I'm blind, and I've been told that if I ever voted Republican, I would lose my friends would lose their disability checks and the whole 9 yards. I stopped believing that a long time ago because the only way you're going to help yourself is to help yourself. And I just don't believe in handouts.
Thank you very much. Detroit, Michigan, you're next. Good morning, Detroit.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
Fine, thanks.
All right. I guess the one guy brought it up, and the reason I called, I wanted to reiterate the importance of the census for this past year. And I think there's a lot of people running around here with this Republican euphoria that's pretty much misguided, because I know in Michigan, they ran Lynn Rivers out because they ran her up against John Dingell in the primary, which she was an incumbent. They also got David Biner out because they redistricted him into a completely Republican district, and then they created a new district in an area where it's highly Republican. In the metro area, Oakland County is a very Republican area. So, 3 seats right there were automatically going to go out to. We lost 2 good representatients who would have been Democrats who had incumbency just because of the redistricting. And then I heard what he said about Florida.
I'm going to leave it at that because we want to let Mr. Giroux respond to you.
Yeah, Michigan was really a key piece of the Republican strategy to hold and expand their House majority, and the caller references Michigan, and he's right. Republicans controlled redistricting in that state. They paired John Dingell, the dean of the House, with Lynn Rivers. Rivers lost the primary. David Bonier's district was drawn as more Republican, and as a result, the Democrats currently hold they held, I should say, a 9-7 advantage in the U.S. House delegation. Now it's 9-6 Republicans. So that's a 3-seat loss for the Democrats in one state alone.
If you're interested in watching more politics, stay with us all day. We're going to have a lot for you. For instance, live at 1 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon from the National Press Club, there will be a post-election joint news conference with Mark Rasko, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and Terry McAuliffe, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Again, that will be live here on C-SPAN at 1 p.m. Eastern Time today. Union City, New Jersey. Good morning.
Good morning. I live in Hudson County, and I am a Republican. And you can never win in Union City or Hudson County with the Democrats. They control it. We had Torricelli, who was a crook, and there's so many crooks in the Democratic Party. Probably some in the Republican too. But we don't hate the way that you're called. Three callers away called about Texas. She hates. We don't hate. We don't agree. We don't like, but we don't hate. How can she call and say she hates the president? What is where does she go to church, or where does she say her prayers, or does she have a family? Does she have children? Don't teach your children to hate anybody.
Thank you. We'll leave it at that. The Senator Lautenberg, the new senator from New Jersey.
Yes.
Did he come in with more seniority?
I'm actually unsure of exactly how much seniority he has, but I don't believe that he's going to have a significant amount of seniority.
I know Mr. Mondale had said that if he were elected, because he had been in the Senate, that he would have more.
Right, but I'm not totally sure about that.
And the Lautenberg numbers, do you have any idea?
I don't have the Lautenberg numbers with me, but I know that he won decisively, and that was one of the first wins that we saw last night. It was one of the Democrats' early victories, and it was one of their only major victories last night.
Fulton, New York, Democrat.
This is Jessie Smart from Fulton, New York. I'm a Democrat, and I would like to say it's very hard to explain things to your children on this Bush's bowl. I think he's a cheat. I think Jeb Bush is a liar, a cheat. It's very hard to pick up the newspaper and read and then have to explain to your kids what you hear. President Bush is an alcoholic, and then you've got Jeb Bush's kids always in the paper for drugs, and then you got President Bush's wife out there trying to tell us how to raise our children. I think she ought to clean up her own backyard. Thanks.
What are your thoughts about these last two calls?
Well, there's an awful lot of voter intensity out there. I mean, I think a lot of people are really, depending on which side of the aisle you sit on, I think people are very pleased by the election results, or very, very disappointed, or even angry.
I think going into last night, we thought that everything was going to sort of remain tight. I don't think anyone expected there to be a really decisive victory on either side, and so obviously a Republican surge has made a lot of people emotional.
Next call, Bellingham, Washington.
Oh, hello. First-time caller. I think fear is the underlying current in my life right now with the results of the election. And, you know, I'm a male, but if I were a woman, I would be concerned about my rights to abortion and just deciding for myself what was going to go down that way. With Homeland Security, that's going to intensify, and the little remarks about it starting to look like the state of Hitler is just going to become even more so, with the youth of Hitler running joyously around in the name of Jesus, as they did back then. It's just frightening. It's just frightening.
Any reaction?
Well, just I think the general tenor of some of these calls, you know, people have very, very strong feelings about last night's elections. That's for sure.
It'll be interesting next couple of days on the phones. Buffalo, Missouri. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just wondering, I've never watched C-SPAN, but it seems like all your callers are, like you say, very polarized, either to the left or to the right. And I'm a male in my mid-30s, and I voted Republican just about every election. But this election in Missouri, I voted for the independent, because I think a lot has to do with the negative ads that are out. I know people say they don't like them, but obviously they work, and they get people, you know, really excited.
Which race and which candidates did you think had the most negative ads?
Well, being a Republican, I would say Gene Carnahan, but to watch Talent's ads, I was just as repulsed by them as I was Carnahan's ads, and I voted for an independent. And I just wonder, when in this country is there going to be a political affiliation that will not spread fear and distrust among the opposition and just bring some people together? What are your views on that?
Thank you. Do either of you see what happened yesterday, a move for expansion of any kind of third party in this country?
I didn't see any significant gains on third party candidates at all.
Yeah, I didn't see any sort of groundswell of support for independent candidates. I mean, some of the more prominent independent candidates, I think, you know, performed a little bit lower. I know Tim Penny in Minnesota didn't do as well as I thought he would in the governor's race, and the two-party system has been with us for so long. It would take an enormous amount of, you know, organizational strength and money, and it would take an awful lot of time to have I think, a viable third party in this country.
Greg Giroux concentrates on the House races, and Mary Claire Jelonic concentrates on the Senate races, both for their publications, which is the Congressional Quarterly. Next call is Lake Wally, South Carolina. Go ahead, Lake Wally.
Yes, ma'am. I work the polls here in York County in South Carolina, which is a really part of the Charlotte metro area, and we got all of these vitriolic Bowles ads against Elizabeth Doe, and my experience, even in South Carolina, people came to the vote to the polls to vote against the Democrats because of these ads. Even though they couldn't vote for Elizabeth Dole, they were so upset by these ads that it brought the voters out in droves. We had approximately 55% at our polling place, and people were making comments all day about this. So I want to invite the Democrats just to continue to spew their hatred and their vitriol and continue with their ridiculous comments. And by next election day, they'll be insignificant. But I want to encourage them to keep it up, and the voters are going to reject them wholesale. Thank you.
Did you see more negative advertising this year than previous?
I wouldn't say more than previous. I think it always comes down to that. And I know York County, South Carolina is a very Republican area. Also, there were Bowles and Dole both had a lot of negative ads in that race, as did Sanders and Graham in the South Carolina Senate race. I think that it was probably a wash in both of those races for negative advertising. I think that, you know, people say they don't like negative advertising, but in the end it works, and that's why every cycle we see a lot of negative advertising. There's a few places, interesting enough, in Utah, there was a competitive House race there, and there was really no negative advertising, and that was one of, at the end of the night, Jim Matheson's seat came down to the wire. It was just as competitive as any other race, but in Utah, people said, you know, they really didn't do any negative campaigning. That's the only case I really saw this year where you really sort of, people in really competitive races, I mean, usually it's going to keep happening.
Today's the day that new campaign finance rules go into effect. Do you see it impacting either the Senate or the House?
Well, that's going to be, I think that's the big question. We have to take some time now to analyze all of the new facets of that law and see, you know, it ostensibly bans the soft money, the non-federal accounts where the parties have raised all of that money. But it's going to be interesting to see what sort of, if you try to cover up, one leak, what sort of leak might spring up there. It's going to be interesting to see what sort of strategies the parties employ to keep the money flowing in many of these races. So that's going to be the interesting thing to see.
Greg Giroux and Mary Claire Jelonic joining us from Congressional Quarterly this morning. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
And just to reiterate today, the current tallies of the United States Senate are like this. The current Congress has 49 Republicans. The 108th Congress will have 51. Democrats had 49. The new Congress will have 46. Current Congress has 2 independents. The new 108th Congress will have 1. That still leaves 2 seats out there to be determined, Mary Landrieu's seat and also the seat that we've been talking about earlier out of South Dakota. On the House side, for the 108th Congress, looks like 226 Republicans, 203 Democrats, and 1 independent. That's as of right now, but there are several races still out there yet to be determined. That's it for the Washington Journal this morning. We'll have lots of election coverage coming up during the day, including a 1 p.m. news conference Eastern Time at the National Press Club with the leadership of the of the Democratic and Republican parties. Thanks for joining us.